Well, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Wade Crowfoot, and I serve as our Natural Resources Secretary and Chair of the Ocean Protection Council. Really excited to welcome you to another meeting of the Council. To kick it off, we'll ask our Deputy Director at OPC, Jenn Eckerle, to call the roll. And Jenn, if you are talking, you may be on mute.
I am here, but I'm trying to turn my camera on. Give me just 1 second here. Always a joy. I can do it. You guys can hear me, right? We'll just.
We sure can.
Okay. Okay, great. So we've got Secretary Blumenfeld.
Yeah.
Councilmember Dumlau.
Here.
Councilmember Diamond.
Here.
Senator Allen.
Here.
And Secretary Crowfoot.
Here.
So we are missing Councilmember Brown and Assemblymember Stone, and hoping they join us soon.
All right, good. Well, thanks again for joining council members and staff at the OPC, and of course, number of members of the public and stakeholders that we have here today. We've got a good meeting in store for today, focused on several areas of the strategic plan that we collectively established, over a year ago at this point. That is really the game plan for the work of OPC to protect our oceans and coasts. We'll talk today about marine protected areas, sustainable fisheries, ensuring best available science, informing our decisions. We'll receive informational updates on the OPC summer internship program, which we're really excited about. I predict that'll be one of the highlights of the meeting. We'll hear about the Mpa Management Program and the 2022 Decadal Adaptive Management Review. We'll start the conversation on a statewide microplastic strategy. We'll hear about an exciting new communications campaign to build awareness across California of sea level rise, and then talk about the Council's recent Prop 68 investments in coastal resilience. As always, we invite public comment, and we'll be taking public comment items 4 through 7 on this agenda, as well as a comment on non-agenda issues on item 9. During each of these items, I'll invite public comment. If you're joining and you want to make public comment, you'll raise your virtual hand and our staff will unmute you, announce your name, and you'll be able to provide your comment to the council. If you've called into the meeting via telephone, which we welcome, you will identify yourself as wanting to talk by pressing #2 to raise your hand. And depending on how you've accessed the meeting, you may also need to unmute yourself. So we're limiting public comment to 2 minutes, and so we can actually hear from everybody, and there'll be a timer on the screen to track your allotted time. Anyone interested in providing comment will need to raise her or his hand by the end of the agenda presentation. So as you're hearing the presentation, make sure that you put yourself in the queue to talk. Hands raised after that time won't be placed in the queue for comment, just given the fact that we need to move through the meeting efficiently. But again, we are excited for public comment as always. So in just a moment, I'll ask my colleagues for any updates they want to provide since we've been together. I think I would draw our attention to some pretty sobering scientific information we received earlier this summer from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC. Most of us know that the IPCC is this constellation of scientists from across our world that are identifying the evolution of climate change and its impacts. And actually, this recent report was written by 234 scientists around the world. As I think a lot of us know, they're identifying, observing, scientifically demonstrating changes that are unprecedented: global temperature and sea level rise. And these changes are increasing at an accelerated pace, not anticipated even a handful of years ago. Ocean heat waves, which have doubled in numbers since 1980, are expected to increase in frequency, with entire impacts to ecosystems across the world. The rate of global mean sea level rise doubled between 2006 and 2018. And we can anticipate that continued warming will result in worse coastal flooding, coastal erosion, threatening habitats and diversity, public health and safety, public property, critical infrastructure, et cetera. So it's sobering, and it's really a wake-up call. I think a lot of us, including the governor, have called this really, after the scientists, a code red for our action on climate change. The good news is that this body, OPC, has developed an ambitious strategic plan, one of the pillars of which is building our climate resilience in our coasts and oceans. So we've got a lot of work underway on that, including coordinating all of our agencies under shared sea level rise principles and a number of investments that we're making based on Proposition 68 and decisions that voters and legislators made. So there's both a call to take greater action on the crisis and continued progress. I'll note that the legislature has passed a budget for the governor's consideration that includes a lot of important investments toward this end of climate resilience and coastal resilience, including proposed $100 million for the Ocean Protection Council in the subsequent 2 budget years for resilience projects, upwards of $500 million to the Coastal Conservancy for coastal resilience projects, and then important funding for state parks to implement its sea level rise adaptation strategy, and funding for the completion of our 5th climate assessment, which is going to contribute scientific understanding, downscaling planetary impacts of climate change to better understand how our coasts and oceans are impacted. And then I won't go through them, but I'll just also compliment Senator Allen and our legislative members for the legislature's leadership, passing a number of bills this year for the governor's consideration that are all focused on coastal and ocean resilience and protection. So lots happening, both in terms of understanding just the mounting challenges we face, but also actions to combat the climate change and its impact on our coasts and oceans. Are there updates or thoughts from other council members before we get underway? Jared.
Thanks, Wade. Thanks, team. I mean, it really does feel like, to your point, that this is the opportunity to really give people some clarity around the problem, but also hope around some of the solutions. And I mean, every time the folks come back, and I want to go back up with the team to the North Coast and look at the incredible work that's being done to help regrow kelp and deal with purple sea urchins. I don't know, some of the stuff that all the team at the Ocean Protection Council is doing, the staff, just when I'm feeling particularly depressed about the world, I think about the amazing work that you're all doing. So just want to really lift up the work and let you all know that it's more than just your day job. It's keeping a lot of people with a sense of purpose and a sense of what we can do to deal with an incredibly global and difficult situation. So those budgetary enhancements, I think, are really a recognition that people know what OPC is doing, people recognize the importance of that agenda, and realize, I think, everyone on this team really want to thank you for lifting up the ocean agenda and letting people understand that there's something we can do about it. I wanted to start by, well, on legislative stuff, I'm just glad that we're finally, thank you, Senator Allen, on SB 343, finally kind of having some truth in advertising. We have on September 18th, Ocean Cleanup Day, which is a global event, always around those days. It's a great event. I don't want to dissuade people from participating in it, but it's kind of to that truth in advertising, it's kind of been used by the plastics industry as a, don't worry, we got it. Let's send volunteers onto beaches to deal with all this crap, as opposed to really thinking about extended producer responsibility. So, you know, moving from citizen action, which is important, to manufacturer and corporate action and owning responsibility for this, I think is an important thing to think about on Ocean Cleanup Day. I also want to have a huge thanks to Assembly Member Mark Stone. We stole his chief, Craig Scholler. Craig is now our deputy at Cal EPA. And so we're keeping it in the family. He is awesome, and Mark, thank you so much for helping make Craig the incredible person he is today, and your generosity as it relates to him. I also want to announce a new staff person, which is Shireen D'Souza. She's going to be the new deputy. She is the new deputy secretary for climate change and intergovernmental relations. And you know, as next week is Climate Week, we then go into the Conference of the Parties. I mean, for me, the strategic plan is so important that we have, as Wade framed out at the beginning, because it says what we're actually going to do, and prioritizing our actions in a time of crisis. I think doing that triage was painful, but incredibly important. And so the more we can all think about how we're laser focused on the things we can make an impact on and measure and report back, is key. So just again, thanks to everyone who's keeping the eye on the prize. We now have, hopefully, after the governor's budget, an opportunity to really hit the ground running. So looking forward to today's meeting.
Thanks so much. And I just want the record to reflect that Assemblymember Stone and Councilmember Brown have joined us. Thanks so much for joining, gentlemen. Over to Senator Allen.
Here we are. Obviously, the legislature had just finished session on Friday. A number of bills. First of all, the budget, of course, enormously important, and we were able to finally get that environmental piece negotiated. And I just want to thank everybody on the call who were a part of that. You know, both Wade and Jared mentioned parts of the budget. I should, just want to reiterate the importance of the $500 million for coastal adaptation. I think that'll be important for OPC and others. Jared mentioned my SB 343 that's headed to the governor's desk that basically says that if you can't, if an item is not truly recyclable, you shouldn't be able to put the recycling symbol, the chasing arrow symbol on the product. Of course, that's part of a series of plastic spills that many of which made their way through the legislature this year. And then, of course, we've got our broader negotiation that continues over SB 54 to try to create a more comprehensive approach. And there's a ballot measure that's qualified for the ballot. So that's a broad negotiation that's going to be happening over the next few months. And I know a number of you will be participating in that effort, but basically trying to move our state away from non-reusable, non-compostable, non-recyclable plastics that continue to end up in our oceans and in our waste stream, increasing the costs for ratepayers. A couple other bills I want to mention, some important work on sea level rise, the Pro Tems SB 1, which puts both money and also really some concerted planning toward the challenges of sea level rise. I had a novel bill that got its way through, got some attention, SB 83, that seeks to create a revolving loan fund that OPC would actually help to administer, that would provide an additional financing tool to cities that are now faced with really tough choices. They've got, sea level rise continues. Cities are having to put more and more money into trying to beat back the sea through seawalls and other forms of mitigation. And so this would provide funding for cities, if they want to buy coastal property and then rent out the properties to make back the money. It's supposed to pencil out in a way that it won't be a net cost to taxpayers. Maybe it'll even gain some money. This is oftentimes very valuable property that can really earn some money over time. While also, and we're hoping the bill will provide an additional tool to cities that are currently really struggling with the politics of, whether they spend their meager resources on public services or on fighting the sea. And then a final bill I should mention is SB 433 that's going to the governor's desk as well. A few years back, the Pro Tem did a bill that gave the Coastal Commission the right to enforce the Coastal Act with regards to public access. Now this bill seeks to give the the Coastal Commission the right to enforce the Coastal Act with regards to violations of any form of the Coastal Act. And that's because we saw all sorts of forms of abuse. And that bill's now heading to the governor's desk, and we took some language to ensure that it wouldn't jam up the Parks Department and other public agencies. So we're certainly hopeful that he'll sign that as well. And I think it's ultimately all about really making sure that the Coastal Act is what it intended to be. So with that, I'm looking forward to our meeting. I'm looking forward to the microplastics item that's going to be coming up a little later in this agenda.
Great, thanks so much. So we're about to transition to Director Gold's report, which I know he's got a lot to share. but I want to give any other opportunity for comment before we go. Seeing no hands, Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Secretary Crowfoot. Also, thanks, Secretary Blumenfeld, for a shout out to Coastal Cleanup Day. Always near and dear to my heart. Coastal Commission runs that each and every year, September 18th this year, and biggest volunteer day on the planet. So a great public partner, public NGO partnership globally that occurs on that, and I hope everyone can find time to get involved. So here's what's going on. On Proposition 1 grants for projects in communities entitled to environmental justice, these are getting finalized, and these projects will be before you in December. That's about $7.5 million worth of projects. We're really excited about how this has all come together. In addition, our competitive Prop 68 call for ocean acidification and hypoxia research and monitoring went out. We got amazing response, 28 letters of intent by really the best researchers on the West Coast and in California working on these issues. And we're partnering with California Sea Grant in reviewing the research proposals, and we'll have recommendations to you at the December meeting as well. So a lot going on at that December meeting. This is $2.2 million of research that adds to our investment last June on ocean acidification and hypoxia monitoring. Other updates on our tribal engagement strategy, a priority within our strategic plan. Listening sessions are getting scheduled right now for November. And we hope to learn best practices for conducting outreach and engaging with tribes through those sessions, as well as multiple tribes' priorities for ocean conservation and management. So great opportunity for us to learn. And we'll also begin formal consultation shortly thereafter. An interactive engagement process should result in a tribal engagement strategy before you next June. On our equity plan development, a lot going on there as well. The Better World Group is who we're working with. Maria Rodriguez is our lead on staff. And they've convened an extraordinary environmental justice advisory group representing the entire coast of California. And they've already met, and they'll meet a few more times and provide critical guidance for equity plan development. Better World Group will work with the Ocean Protection Council to develop the plan and solicit public feedback in the months to come. This equity plan should come to the OPC in February, so look for that then. On 30 by 30, which obviously is Governor Newsom's one of his top priorities environmentally, there was a coastal waters conservation panel that met multiple times, and as well in a public panel meeting, and they put together a superb white paper. This information, as well as stakeholder feedback, we recently met with the fishing community. This whole effort, of course, is being spearheaded by Deputy Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat, Dr. Jennifer Norris. And so stakeholder feedback, as well as staff recommendations, will inform the overall land and sea 30 by 30 pathway document. The first public draft should be out within the next couple of months. Priorities include, but they're not limited to, conserving biodiversity for years to come, and monitoring and enhancing access for all, as well as partnerships with tribes to develop inclusive conservation policies. So a lot going on 30 by 30. On offshore wind, there was an excellent workshop held by the Coastal Commission last Thursday on the consistency determination process for moving forward with lease sales off the coast of California. Also discussion on the current status and plans for these potential lease sales for floating offshore wind off of Central California, as well as the North Coast. The Ocean Protection Council, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and California Energy Commission have also worked together as well to facilitate some new studies to fill critical data gaps and expedite existing studies. This information is really critical for the Coastal Commission to move forward with their consistency determination documents. March is when they're planning to hear the Humboldt lease sale, and June is the current schedule for the Central Coast lease sale. Just an aside, I've been so heartened to see the cooperation between really every agency that's working on offshore wind. It really is the best example of collaboration that I've seen since I was appointed over 2 years ago. It's really been fun to be engaged on that. And just to wrap up, it's just great to have Jenn Savage here with us today. This is her first Ocean Protection Council meeting as our communications and policy manager. So welcome to you, Jenn, and we're so grateful to have you here for us, considering your incredible history on these issues. So very cool. And with that, I'll pass it over to Dr. Liz Whiteman, who's going to give us an update on what's going on at OST.
Thank you, Mark. I will tee up. I believe I may have one slide to tee up here. As always, great to be here with you today. A quick update from me on behalf of your science advisory team. If we can go ahead and just move to the next slide. This year at your council meetings in February and June, we were pleased to deliver science recommendations and advice from expert panels that draw from the science advisory team, from California's science community, as well as expertise nationally, to deliver forward-looking guidance on the statewide network of marine protected areas, assessing the risk of microplastics to foster policy action, and recommend approaches to ocean acidification monitoring for strategic investments. So as you see coded on the slide, we're pleased to have provided a science basis to accelerate action, principally on OPC Strategic Plan Goals 1 and 3 over the past year plus. But there is more that we can and should do, of course, in support of these goals, as well as the other important goals on equity and a sustainable blue economy, goals 2 and 4 in your strategic plan. Moreover, as Chair Crowfoot already mentioned, I think the recent release of the IPCC Physical Science Report shook all of us. And even for the science community working on climate change, the report underscored the need to accelerate action and accelerate solution development, something that Secretary Blumenfeld mentioned earlier. But honestly, most of the ways that science interfaces with policy, not just here in California, but nationally and internationally, were designed for a different time. So I'm grateful to all of the members of the Science Advisory team for engaging with us through the summer to take a reflective look at what's working, what can be improved, and importantly, what needs to change in the context of today and the urgency we feel, and that is real. So there are pieces that are about speeding up the process. There are also pieces that are about continuing to hone what it is that science can bring to the policymaking table in the way of roadmaps for action, strategic choice sets, and solutions, even in the face of deep uncertainties into our future. So we're poised and ready to support OPC in the coming years. I just wanted to share one more thing, that we've recently completed the first round of outreach to build a directory of scientists working in California with expertise and interest in supporting on California's goals for our coast and ocean. And with over 150 responses and just an initial round of outreach, I think we are well on a path to diversifying the fields of study, the voices, the perspectives, who can co-create science solutions to the challenges that lie ahead. So I look forward to being able to share an updated version of this slide with you at a future council meeting with outputs and outcomes that encompass all 4 of the strategic plan goals, building on the work of the last year and more. And so with that, thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. And as always, so helpful to have you doing the work you're doing with other leading scientists across our state. I mean, I think we really are a model of downscaling the climate change science and really helping understand how we act, or how we should act or what actions we should take. But I really also appreciate, the recognition that we have to move quickly, and we can't adopt a sort of a wait and see approach or a study and then act. In some cases, we have to take action as we're learning the best approach. And I think our work up in the North Coast as it relates to urchin and kelp is a really good example of moving and acting with the urgency that we need to, but working with you all to really ensure that there's a strong scientific basis for what we're doing. And then, Mark, I just have to say, I think, probably speaking to a person, we're all really excited that Jenn Savage has joined the OPC. I think all of us have really enjoyed her constructive engagement, helping educate us from her position as an external stakeholder. So it's great to bring in her expertise and perspective onto the OPC staff. Generally speaking, I brag a lot about the OPC staff, and I feel like it's an embarrassment of riches in terms of just the great folks that we have. So very much appreciate that. And that leads us into the next item. But let me first stop and ask if anybody has questions for Mark or Liz on their report. All right, Mike.
Unmute. Thank you, and apologies for having a little difficulty getting on. But I kind of a comment, but also for Mark and Liz. I think that there is so much great science work and science connecting policy, and the folks that are involved in it in, I'll say, a daily way, tend to be the ones who are aware of it. But I have a sense that out there in the communities of California, whether they're coastal communities or inland communities who, see California's coastline as a precious resource, don't really have a sense of some of the scientific developments and work that's being done. And with the addition of Jennifer to the OPC team in that role, perhaps you can think through how to do a little more regular communication for, call it, lay folks and the general public about much of this scientific research and I'll say progress in understanding, and especially to your point, Liz, the fact that we have to accelerate both our understanding and our policy responses. I think it is really an imperative that we do a better job of helping the public follow what is going on, and to the extent that they understand that, they'll hopefully get more involved in the discussions that need to take place to make responding to climate change and protecting California's oceans happen in a much more coherent way.
Councilmember Brown, I appreciate the comment. I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly the impetus behind Jenn Eckerle and myself making the determination to create a communications and policy management position. We haven't had one before at the OPC, so we understand that. I would also say, as Dr. Whiteman can attest to, we've probably had, I don't know, 20 meetings on this in the last year and a half or so on this exact topic. COVID has definitely impacted the approach that we had on the research community. It was something that Liz and I were so excited about to really jump into in a major way. The roadshow that we talked about a lot to the CSUs and the UCs was going to be quite helpful. And just lastly, what you're going to see on sea level rise later on today in the communications item with some of the stuff Dr. Kat Beheshti is doing on Prop 68. And then, of course, we also have a separate contract on an overall communications plan for OPC for the very first time that we're working on right now as well. Really to just follow through on what you're saying is a glaring need for improvement on what we're doing. And so we recognize that and we're making investments in numerous different places to really try to fill those gaps as soon as humanly possible. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Great reports. Next, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is an informational item. And as I mentioned in the prelude to the discussion today, we are really excited to have invited a dynamic set of summer interns to join OPC. And this is part of our effort to really ensure that we're building a pipeline of talented leaders on these topics that can actually come into state government and public government work. I think a lot of us have observed there's great people working in government, but there a lot of senior folks, and what can we do to really build the pipeline? So big thanks to Jenn and Mark for establishing this program and recruiting such a remarkable group of young leaders. So we'll hear now an update from Jenn and actually our interns directly on the work they did this summer.
Thank you so much, Chair Crowfoot and members of the council. I'm Jenn Eckerle, and I'm the Deputy Director at OPC. And I'm so happy to be here today introducing this next item, which is an update from our summer interns. This summer, OPC launched its first ever paid internship. This 10-week program was focused on providing rising juniors and senior undergraduate students with the opportunity to build a foundational background with California's coastal and ocean science, policy, and management work. We received around 140 applications and selected 5 students for this internship program: Bella Alvarado, Mairin Culwell, Madhu Garimella, Nayre Herrera, and Claudia Sanchez-Rea. In addition, Molly Glickman joined us through a merit-based award from the Haas Center for Public Services Undergraduate Fellowships Program at Stanford University, marking the 4th year of this ongoing partnership between OPC and Stanford. This cohort of 6 interns helped advance priorities in our strategic plan while gaining meaningful professional experience within state government. During their internship, each student worked closely with staff members and had an opportunity to participate in programmatic efforts, including interagency meetings, reviewing grant proposals, and conducting bill analyses. In addition to providing this broad agency support, OPC summer interns were responsible for leading specific projects with discrete work products that will directly support OPC's policy work. Furthermore, the cohort worked together on a collaborative project, each contributing sections to OPC's first annual Coast and Ocean report to be finalized by OPC staff later this year. Today, each intern will provide a brief presentation on their project. And I just want to end here by saying that the goal of this summer internship program was really to provide students with an opportunity to increase their skills and their knowledge and their exposure to ocean and coastal conservation in California. But it was a win-win situation for all of us, as the OPC team truly benefited from working with these 6 curious, intelligent, motivated students this summer. We are impressed with their fearlessness and their resilience, particularly while participating in a full-time internship from their living rooms. We are grateful for their efforts, and we are truly inspired by this next generation of ocean champions. And with that, I'd like to invite Bella Alvarado to begin the presentation.
Hello, thank you, Jen. I'm Bella Alvarado. I'm a 4th year at UCLA studying environmental science with a minor in environmental systems and society. During my time at OPC, I worked under Dr. Justine Kimball, who is the Senior Climate Change Program Manager. I'd like to thank her for her guidance and support this summer. Next slide. The majority of my time this summer was dedicated to studying offshore wind and specifically turbines with floating foundations designed for deep waters as seen off of California. My work contributed to Goal 4 of OPC's strategic plan, support ocean health through a sustainable blue economy. Currently, 2 sites in federal waters off the coast of Morro Bay and Humboldt are being considered for offshore wind farms, and pending findings, a lease sale may occur in 2022. I wrote a white paper based upon the conditions and concerns for these 2 potential offshore wind farms by synthesizing available information on 3 broad topics: California tribes, marine species, and fisheries. The paper discussed any concerns and recommendations that resulted from consultations and meetings with all California tribes. The marine species section discussed the fish, whales, benthic species, and seabirds within the proposed wind farms and potential impacts such as entanglement, collision, or habitat creation. The final section addressed effects of wind farms on fisheries, including fishing ground overlaps, gear types used, and economic importance. In addition to conveying the information from best available research on offshore wind impacts, I summarized OPC's research grants to contribute to their first ever annual State of the Coast and Ocean report. OPC's grants fulfilled an action requiring the funding of research to assess the environmental and socioeconomic impacts of potential offshore wind projects under the strategic plan's target 4.4.1. Thank you to OPC for this incredible opportunity and my fellow interns for their support this summer. Next slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mairin Culwell, and I am a 3rd year at UC Berkeley, where I'm majoring in political science and in environmental policy. This summer, I was fortunate to work with Holly Wire as my mentor, who formerly served as the Marine Pollution Program Manager. Next slide, please. So under Holly's guidance, I got to spend most of my summer working on the California Microplastics Strategy document, which is an important piece of work that was assigned to the OPC under Senate Bill 1263 and is part of the OPC's strategic plan goals of reducing plastic pollution and launching monitoring programs. In the microplastic strategy, I mainly focused on 2 topics: methods for monitoring microplastics and case studies of businesses that are also tackling this pollution crisis. For the work on monitoring, I developed a chapter on best approaches to monitor microplastics that was guided by research from working groups in California. This section was also supported by an accompanying appendix that outlined research methods and technologies used from the collection of samples in the water to analyzing the types of plastics found ultimately in the laboratory. This appendix dives into more technical information and recommendations that can ultimately be applied to future monitoring programs in our state. For the case studies, I was able to showcase 2 local California businesses that are leading the way in source reduction of microplastics through economic and educational support, as well as 1 study on a cutting-edge startup in the UK with a promising model for capturing tire dust particles, which is a form of microplastic pollution that is heavily focused on in this document. I was lucky enough to get to work on the microplastic strategy with Molly Glickman, and outside of our specific chapters, we also collaborated on more technical edits throughout the document and on bolstering different sections with additional research and comments. I got to add extra notes on different topics like microplastics in agriculture and variations of microplastic concentrations throughout the water column, which is super exciting to research on, as well as following Molly's lead on a risk assessment that she'll present on later. Outside of this microplastic strategy, I was also able to work with my fellow interns on contributing to this upcoming Coast and Ocean report by adding a section that summarizes the OPC's current work and recommendations for tackling macroplastic pollution. This addition to the report helps re-emphasize another one of the OPC's strategic goals of achieving zero trash entering state waters. Being able to work on advancing these initiatives for both macro and microplastic pollution has been an incredible learning experience. I'm so grateful to Holly, Molly, and the entire OPC team for their support during these amazing 10 weeks. Next slide, please.
Hi, my name is Madhu Garimella. I'm going into my 4th year at UC San Diego, where I'm majoring in environmental systems with an emphasis in ecology, behavior, and evolution, with a minor in economics. During my internship at OPC, I primarily worked with Maria Rodriguez, who I'd like to thank for her amazing mentorship this summer. Next slide, please. Throughout my time at OPC, my efforts helped advance Goal 2 of the strategic plan, advancing equity across ocean, coastal policies and actions, especially within the Prop 1 solicitation. This solicitation of Prop 1 emphasized that projects must have a direct and long-lasting benefits to communities entitled to environmental justice that were also within 3 miles of the coast. These communities are identified as disadvantaged and severely disadvantaged communities, California Native tribes and tribal governments, and communities that score above 80% on Cal Enviro screen results. This particular solicitation was written in this way so that projects that benefit such communities would not have to compete with others when it came to funding. This is a way to create a more equitable funding pathway that also funded projects that had a more direct impact on the communities that they would serve. This varied from the last Prop 68 solicitation because Prop 1 proposals had to demonstrate the projects funded will have direct and long-lasting benefits to the communities entitled to environmental justice they were located in. Within this call, I helped with the full proposal reviews, as did the other interns. I also helped create a review guide for the intern cohort and helped guide the interns in the review process. I additionally helped in collating the scores and comments from the reviews and aided in scheduling full proposal review. I translated my experience with Prop 1 into a portion of the annual State of the Coast and Ocean report. I authored the section on Prop 1 and Prop 68 funding and discussed the important environmental justice takeaways that were learned from those rounds of funding, like the importance of protected funding, which is needed because communities entitled to environmental justice often do not have the resources to compete with others when applying for grants. This results in fewer long-term benefits projects actually being funded. The last Prop 1 solicitation OPC conducted was their first step in accomplishing a pathway and dedicated funding. From this funding, there will be a more meaningful approach created so that community engagement and benefit was at the forefront. This was one of the main takeaways emphasized for the Prop 1 and Prop 68 funding story that I emphasized the annual State of the Coast and Ocean report. Outside of Prop 1, I also helped create high-level summary documents that will be helpful for creating wetlands principles and a wetlands management plan. And lastly, I worked to create a policy recommendation and resource document to aid future endeavors in addressing toxic sites and sea level rise impact on vulnerable communities, as this will be a rising concern for communities with the impacts of climate change. I gathered research from various agencies, journals, screening tools, and data sources to come up with a list of 3 policy recommendations and a bank of 8 resources to further aid and guide future policy on this front. And now I'll pass it to Molly Glickman.
Hi everyone, my name is Molly Glickman and I'm a rising junior at Stanford University pursuing a major in marine biology and a minor in political science. This summer, I also worked closely with Holly Wire, who formerly served as Marine Pollution Program Manager at OPC. Next slide, please. The majority of my time this summer was spent working on OPC's microplastics strategy draft alongside Mairin, and my tasks primarily included completing draft sections and incorporating new information into the strategy document. I specifically worked on the introduction, background, risk assessment framework section, monitoring framework, and policy recommendation sections. I conducted microplastic pollution research using outside resources and existing studies to put together the background section and to gain insight for the policy recommendation section. For the monitoring framework section, I solicited feedback from OPC science partners who were already doing work in microplastics monitoring, like the State Water Resources Control Board. Mairin and I also conducted a pilot run of the risk assessment framework for microplastic sources and endpoints. And this task involved reviewing, loading, and internalizing the relevant research on microplastic sources into the risk assessment framework tool to determine which types of microplastics should be prioritized for reduction-based policy action. And our final task was to solicit feedback from OPC science partners on the draft and incorporate their revisions based on feedback and comments. OPC mainly requested feedback from the Plastic Pollution Steering Committee, which includes members of the State Water Resources Control Board, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and the California Environmental Protection Agency, among others. And once feedback was obtained from these groups, we incorporated it into subsequent drafts of the strategy. So in addition to working on the microplastic strategy draft, I also drafted a section of the annual Coast and Ocean report focused on microplastics. And this project was great to do alongside the microplastic strategy document because it essentially just involved putting together a 3-page document that summarized the key information and highlights from OPC's microplastic strategy draft, which is obviously a much longer document. My work this summer mainly served to advance Goal 3 within OPC's strategic plan, which is to enhance coastal and marine biodiversity. My work specifically addressed Objective 3.4 to improve coastal and ocean water quality. And this objective has sub-goals of advancing development of a baseline of plastic pollution monitoring data. So this is the monitoring framework that I mentioned, as well as to develop a statewide microplastic strategy, which is obviously the strategy document. I'd like to thank OPC for this incredible opportunity. The experience that I got this summer was truly unmatched, and it wouldn't have been possible without the support of such a remarkable team. So thank you. And next slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nayre Herrera. I am a 4th year from Humboldt State University, located on the North Coast. I am studying environmental science and management with an emphasis in plan and policy, while also finishing my minor in water resource policy. This summer at OPC, I worked alongside Mike Eckerle, who is OPC's Marine Program Manager and Tribal Liaison. Personally, I have a strong interest in working with tribes in my future career as a planner or policy analyst at the state level, so this was really an excellent opportunity to experience that firsthand. Next slide, please. So during my time at OPC, I worked on 2 separate projects that provided deliverables that advanced 2 goals in OPC's strategic plan. The goal of my first project was to develop a set of recommendations that could be used to guide and support the expansion of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network across California. In brief, the TMSN is an MPA Indigenous Stewardship Program that has experienced really great success in its pilot program thus far. Summaries of the work in progress by partners within the TMSN will be included in OPC's State of the Ocean and Coast Report, so that information will be available to the public within the next year. I had the opportunity to meet with tribal partners and identify key areas of interest that became the focus of my research and recommendations. Type of recommendations included in the document were important lessons learned from other Indigenous stewardship programs around the world, a potential onboarding process for new tribal partners, pathways for long-term sustainable funding, and potential best practices for government agencies that seek to work with the TMSN in any capacity as the network continues to grow across the state. The final comprehensive document is held by the OPC and has been shared with the TMSN partners to support their work as they move forward to expand the geographic range of the network and recruit more tribes in the future. The goal of my second project was to develop a guidance document that could be used by land management agencies as they continue to develop mitigation and adaptation plans for the impacts of sea level rise on culturally significant resources. I had the opportunity to meet with state parks historic preservation officers early in my project development to identify areas where state park priorities and the goals of this project could align. Ultimately, the guidance document contained a literature review of the methods tribes have used in their sea level rise planning and adaptation efforts in California, and it really highlighted the importance of building tribal capacity for tribes to conduct their own assessments and collect the information necessary for them to effectively plan for sea level rise at a place-specific level. Lastly, the document also included a list of best practices that outlined how agencies can support tribes as they continue to conduct their own vulnerability assessments into the future. And now I'll pass this off to Claudia to finish us off.
Thank you, Nayre. Okay, good morning all. My name is Claudia Sanchez-Rea. I am a 4th year student at CSU Northridge, majoring in general biology. And this summer, I had the opportunity to work alongside Marine Protected Areas Program Manager, Lindsay Benito, who was an outstanding mentor to me. Next slide, please. During my time with OPC, I worked on one main project and one side project under the supervision of my mentor and with the support of the MPA team and my fellow interns. The focus of my main project was to compile background information and assessment data on the socioeconomic effects of MPA implementation on coastal communities, with a focus on non-consumptive stakeholders to be used as reference for the socioeconomic impact questionnaire that will be developed for the MPA Decadal Management Review of 2022. My deliverables consisted of a compilation of literary resources, possible academic partners, potential survey takers amongst stakeholders of interest, and a listing of possible survey questions and survey methods, with a focus on socioeconomic assessment models and strategies, which was written as a white paper and coded as a markdown document using RStudio for a cleaner finished product. My work contributed to Goal 4 of OPC's strategic plan, supporting ocean health through a sustainable blue economy, as well as the human domain recommendations presented in the 2021 Scientific Guidance for Evaluating California's Marine Protected Area Network document published by OPC this year. In addition to conveying the information from best available research on socioeconomic impacts of MPA implementation, I also summarized OPC's socioeconomic impacts overview, as well as their kelp restoration and recovery strategy for my secondary project, to contribute to the first ever annual State of the Coast and Ocean report. Every project completed helped to advance OPC's strategic plan, particularly Goal 4, supporting ocean health through a sustainable blue economy, and Goal 3, Objective 3.2, to restore and protect kelp ecosystems. I am very honored to have been able to participate in this internship and would like to say a big thank you to my mentor, Lindsay, to Mark and Jen, and to my fellow interns for making this such an incredible experience. Next slide, please. As to our collective experience during this internship, we would foremost like to thank OPC for this opportunity, as well as for their guidance and support. The greatest highlights of this program were the relationships we built with each other as an intern cohort, as well as the relationships we built with OPC staff members who provided guidance on our projects and shared invaluable career advice and insight during our Interns Career Talk series. OPC also placed a lot of trust and confidence in us, making us feel like an integrated part of the staff with independent projects or even leading roles to advance OPC's priorities, which allowed us to feel confident in our efforts and gave us a deeper insight into the complexity of OPC's work. Last but not least, the independence we were allotted was a defining point of our experience with OPC, as we were able to work self-sufficiently. And although it was scary to have to lead our own projects on our own terms, it was a valuable experience on leadership and self-motivation. As for our suggestions for further development of this program, we recommend solidifying a direct mentor-mentee relationship for each intern, especially in our current remote work settings, as it made navigating the ins and outs of the council much easier. We would also suggest providing predetermined project options for optimal productivity and deliverable quality. And although our internship was entirely remote and OPC did a great job of navigating and reducing barriers to joining this program, we would recommend a hybrid approach of remote work and in-person meeting opportunities, or providing financial assistance for relocation for an in-person internship when possible. As the first intern cohort, we hope that our experience and time at OPC can provide a valuable example for future internship programs. And although our remote work settings would not typically have been the norm, the challenge of working with such an outstanding team on such important projects was nonetheless an invaluable opportunity for us all. Thank you to everyone at OPC for your support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and all of our interns. Remarkable work, and let me just express my appreciation for you coming on board in this first year of the program and contributing in such a meaningful way to all of these timely, important priorities. I'm really energized by the work and the engagement, and also take to heart the suggestions you've made to continue to improve the program into its second year. Big thanks to the OPC staff too for establishing this and providing mentorship, and really hopeful that this is a program that can continue to benefit OPC in the state and also the interns, and of course grow in the future. So with that, Mark.
Yeah, I just I just wanted to add that this was, and I know Jen would agree, this is about the most rewarding thing that I think we've ever worked on with our staff and in this administration. And the quality of the interns was just extraordinary. I mean, again, we had a candidate pool of 140, so it shows you how large a demand there is. And so I just want to close with saying that BCDC did a similar thing. They had three interns. We collaborated every step of the way on our approach. I just really encourage everybody with your connections to other departments and agencies to start a similar program, because it really is. It's so enriching, and it's it's so heartening to hear from the actual interns what they got out of it. But this was equal. I mean, we got as much out of them as they got out of us. I was just so thrilled by the quality of work. It was not your typical situation of, oh, let's try to find stuff to do. We threw them into the deep end and they came out, being Olympic swimmers. It was pretty amazing. And so I really hope that other departments are taking notice that, this sort of internship program is great. You don't have to wait for someone who has a graduate degree to use as an intern. Rising juniors and seniors in our amazing CSU and UC system. Okay, I'll throw in Stanford too. Don't make me throw in USC though. There is a line. And so it just shows you really the work that these young adults can really achieve. Thank you.
Well, here, Mark. Once again, congratulations to all involved. We will move on now to agenda item 5, which is both an informational and an action item, and it's focused on our marine protected areas and the management program for those areas. We all know that California is managing an internationally recognized network of 124 areas that are protected in some form. And so we're going to hear an update first from one of our colleagues, Tove Handelman, on the MPA Management Program, and our colleague from Fish and Wildlife, Craig Schumann, on planning for the 2022, what we call the decadal review, but it's really the adaptive management review of the MPA network in its first 10 years. That's an informational piece. And then we've got 2 action items that we'll ask be presented. One is consideration of authorization to disperse funds for specifically an MPA signage project, and then consideration of authorization to disperse funds for MPA long-term monitoring, and specifically the California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program. So we'll do those 3 sets of presentations, and then we'll provide an opportunity for public comment, and then we'll have council discussion and consideration of those action items. So without further ado, I would ask Tove to join us on screen to present on the management program for MPAs.
Good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot and members of the council. I'm Tove Handelman, OPC's Senior Marine Protected Area Program Manager. I am pleased to present an update on California's Marine Protected Area Management Program to you and to the partners and stakeholders in attendance today. The MPA Management Program is just a year away from its first ever decadal review, as Secretary Crowfoot just mentioned. And that's when the Department of Fish and Wildlife will present its findings in a report to the Fish and Game Commission in December of 2022. And CDFW's Marine Region Manager, Dr. Craig Schumann, will provide the council with an update about the decadal management review in just a moment. But first, I will present an overview of the efforts that have been made in the MPA Management Program that can serve as important context for the decadal review to come. So let's get started. Next slide, please. We'll start with a very quick overview of California's MPA network. The network is made up of 124 MPAs of varying protection levels that cover 16% of state waters. The MPA network was developed through an innovative science-guided and stakeholder-driven process, which was completed in 2012, and thus the first decadal review will take place 10 years later in 2022. These 124 MPAs are managed as a statewide network through the MPA Management Program which is a collaboration between the California Department of Fish and Wildlife as the lead managing agency, the Ocean Protection Council, the Fish and Game Commission, and the MPA statewide leadership team. This collaborative approach ensures the MPA network is adaptively managed and informed by engaged partnerships. Management of the network is guided by the 6 goals laid out in the Marine Life Protection Act, which aims to protect and sustain marine ecosystems for the long-term health of California's oceans. Next slide. The MPA Management Program is rooted in a novel interagency and public-informed governance structure that incorporates local interest and knowledge with state policy and direction. This approach creates effective decision-making, leverages resources, and supports the engagement of the MPA network's diverse stakeholder community. Significant investments have been made by the state and philanthropic and community partners to establish and implement the MPA Management Program over the past decade. The state now contributes $12.5 million annually to the many facets of the MPA Management Program and leverages the additional funds, staff time, and in-kind donations from non-governmental partners. This collaborative approach is key to the success of the MPA Management Program, not only because it ensures long-term sustainable financing for program operations, but also because it includes the active participation of its constituency to inform and improve MPA management. Next slide. Best practices recommended worldwide for successful MPA management identifies 4 pillars that make up the foundation of the MPA Management Program, which are outreach and education, research and monitoring, enforcement and compliance, and policy and permitting. Active and sustained engagement in each of these pillars is integral to achieve the goals of the MPA network. And over the past 10 years, the MPA Management Program has achieved considerable accomplishments across these areas in collaboration with many partners along the way. And while the management review in 2022 will go into more detail about the accomplishments and lessons learned over the past decade, I'd like to highlight a few in each pillar to give a sense of just how much effort has been put into the MPA Management Program. Next slide. With funds provided by state agencies, community partners, and private donors, CDFW and partners statewide developed a wide range of educational resources for all ages, including videos, brochures, activity books, social media campaigns, lesson plans for K through 12 students, and a statewide signage effort that you'll hear more about in the next presentation for item 5B. These resources cover topics including general information about the MPA network and its regulations, tribal traditions and uses, and fishing and tide pooling guidance. So many fantastic resources were produced that I don't have time to list them all, but I encourage everyone listening today to look through the links provided in the staff recommendation for this item, which is posted on OPC's webpage with this meeting agenda. There are fun and informative resources available to download for free, and several of the resources are available in both English and Spanish. Next slide. With 33% of California's MPAs being co-located with a coastal state park, I would like to take just a moment to highlight how the Department of Parks and Recreation is a leading example when it comes to their interagency partnership and MPA outreach and education. With support from an OPC grant, State Parks has developed new MPA content across 8 coastal districts, from Humboldt to San Diego. State Parks interpreters delivered MPA messaging through in-person programs in state parks, as well as through its online distance learning program called the Ports Program. In 2020, MPA interpreters played a remarkable role in the state parks response to park and school closures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. State Parks interpreters delivered virtual field trips, reaching thousands of K through 12 learners and their families as they sheltered in place. They also created an app that allows you to take a virtual dive into Point Lobos State Marine Reserve, and even took their programming a step further and began training divers to deliver virtual programs to students live from underwater in an MPA. By the end of 2020, State Parks delivered over 900 MPA programs and reached more than 61,000 students and park visitors, which is pretty impressive. Next slide, please. We'll move on to research and monitoring now. California has established a statewide MPA monitoring program that is already helping resource managers understand MPA effects. From 2007 to 2016, scientists conducted baseline monitoring of California's MPA network to obtain a snapshot of ecological and socioeconomic conditions along our coast at the time that the MPAs were implemented. Since 2019, scientists have been conducting long-term monitoring in the habitats listed on the slide here, both inside and outside MPAs, to track any changes relative to the baseline conditions. Research teams are also exploring the human dimensions of MPAs, including MPA impacts on recreational and commercial fisheries, and are helping to disentangle MPA effects from natural ocean phenomena such as marine heat waves. The MPA monitoring program includes diverse sources of data, which strengthens resource managers' understanding of ocean health across the MPA network, such as community and citizen science programs, which contribute valuable data to long-term monitoring through kelp forest and rocky reef surveys. The California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program also leverages a unique partnership between researchers and recreational anglers to provide fisheries management data. And actually, my colleague, Lindsay Bonito, will be presenting more about this program in item 5C for your consideration. The state's significant investment in MPA monitoring has resulted in a wealth of data, analyses, and technical reports that are publicly available and can be accessed on the California Ocean Protection Council data repository. Next slide. California Native American tribes have served as valuable partners in several state-funded ocean and coastal monitoring to date, and have gathered indigenous traditional knowledge through interviews and archival research. With examples of successful co-management efforts in British Columbia and Australia, the state and California tribes have worked together to establish the Tribal Marine Stewards Network. This program is based in partnership, but is driven and led by tribes to identify shared MPA monitoring priorities between tribes and the state. This could include monitoring culturally important species or locations, human use monitoring, water quality sampling, and the collection of indigenous traditional knowledge. Importantly, the tribes and the state are working together to develop a respectful and appropriate pathway for sharing the data and knowledge collected with the state and the broader tribal community to further advance co-management efforts. The Tribal Marine Stewards Network is currently in its pilot stage and is composed of 4 partner tribes: Talowa Dene Nation, Rezagini Rancheria, Kashaya Band of Pomo Indians, and the Amamutsin Tribal Band. The state is actively working with the tribes to scale up the Stewards Network to include more tribes and address broader priorities in ocean conservation. The establishment of the Tribal Marine Stewards Network is an important example of the transparent and collaborative work of the MPA Management Program to inform adaptive and more equitable management of the MPA network. Next slide, please. Given the immense amount of effort to monitor the MPA network, California is starting to see encouraging results regarding the positive impact MPAs have had on coastal resources. Some older, highly protected MPAs, such as Point Lobos State Marine Reserve and the Northern Channel Islands MPAs, have already demonstrated positive responses to protection, including bigger and more abundant sea life. In the Northern Channel Islands, these positive effects were observed after 5 years of protection and have continued and are even more pronounced after 10 years. What's more is that these effects were seen both inside and outside of MPAs, demonstrating that the protection provided by MPAs has a wider positive effect beyond their boundaries in that area. In preparation for the Decadal Management Review in 2022, scientists are currently analyzing long-term monitoring data to see if similar effects can be seen in other areas. Next slide. Enforcement and compliance are essential to ensure that the MPA network can provide ecological benefits to its fullest potential. Over the past 10 years, many improvements have been made to streamline enforcement measures, including transitioning the state to a records management system to collect and track citation data. In 2019, CDFW Law Enforcement Division efforts were significantly increased due to collaborative funding between CDFW and OPC. The funds supported enforcement officers, maintenance, and technology required for an increased and effective presence both onshore and on the water. With the additional funds, CDFW Law Enforcement Division was also able to purchase another large patrol vessel to further increase patrol capabilities, and the vessel is scheduled to arrive in November of this year. As with the other areas of MPA management, improving enforcement and compliance statewide requires strong community partnerships. Through joint funding from OPC and the Resources Legacy Fund, the MPA Collaborative Network has made valuable contributions to statewide compliance efforts by administering trainings for enforcement partners such as city lifeguards and park rangers. Last year, they held a training for California district attorneys to explain the importance of prosecuting MPA cases under criminal and civil law. The California District Attorneys Association found this training to be so useful that it inspired the creation of a new MPA prosecutors task force to improve coordination related to the prosecution of MPA cases statewide. The task force is set to be launched this month. The MPA Collaborative Network has also held community compliance forums for each coastal county to better understand stakeholder concerns and recommend local solutions to improve compliance. In fact, the MPA signage project for your consideration in item 5B stemmed from some of those recommendations that came from these forums. These efforts provide a holistic view of what's happening in individual MPAs on the local level that bolsters the state's management approach across the MPA network. Next slide. The interagency partnerships fostered by the MPA Management Program have improved communication among state and federal agencies and strengthened a consistent approach for permitting and regulation issues across jurisdictions and mandates. The MPA statewide leadership team is a great example of how the governance of the MPA network is solidly based in partnership. The MPA statewide leadership team was established in 2014 and is made up of representatives from these state and federal agencies, California Native American tribes, and then non-governmental partners. The leadership team advises the Secretary for Natural Resources on all things related to MPA governance, and having the MPA Management Program rooted in this diverse partnership provides a direct venue for local perspectives to be heard on the executive level. The leadership team's 4-year work plan identifies shared priorities and outlines key actions for the partners to accomplish together to make progress toward achieving the goals of the Marine Life Protection Act. While we are talking about MPA policy, it's important to acknowledge that despite the fact that many of California's MPAs are located in ancestral territories of California tribes, the MPA designation process initially failed to address tribal concerns and rights. The MPA Management Program recognizes the important role that tribes play in MPA management and has made concerted effort to ensure engagement with tribes on MPA policy matters through consultation, representation on the statewide leadership team, and through informal conversations and outreach to tribal members. And the MPA Management Program will continue to do so going forward. In February 2020, the Fish and Game Commission adopted a co-management vision statement and definition, which was created in collaboration with CDFW and California Native American tribes. This represents a significant step forward in advancing co-management of the MPA network and will help continue discussions to identify additional policy opportunities in collaboration with tribes. Next slide. As one of the world's largest MPA networks, California is globally recognized as a leader in MPA management. As such, the MPA Management Program is further strengthened through opportunities to share knowledge with and learn from other MPA managers, researchers, and enforcement personnel across the country and internationally. California's MPA managers have participated in conferences and webinars and have strengthened relationships with other MPA managers across the US through the National MPA Center. And they have also participated in information exchanges with MPA managers from British Columbia, Chile, Indonesia, and Australia. At the end of this month, staff from OPC and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will participate in a 2-day virtual summit with staff from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to consider ways to enhance MPA management across the West Coast. On the global scale, the state of California is currently in the process of being evaluated for fair and equitable governance of the MPA network to add the MPA network to the IUCN Green List of protected areas. The expert assessment group is currently concluding its evaluation process, and the MPA network is expected to be included on the IUCN Green List in 2022. Next slide. As the state prepares for its first decadal review of the MPA network, it is clear just how much effort has been put into the 4 pillars of the MPA management program. Guided by extensive scientific research and policy and informed by Indigenous traditional knowledge and local expertise, the MPA management program is well positioned to continue leading California's ocean conservation and protecting biodiversity. Governor Newsom launched a parallel effort to protect California's biodiversity and build climate resilience by establishing a state goal of conserving at least 30% of California's land and coastal waters by 2030. While the MPA network is a fundamental component to meeting California's 30 by 30 goals, the executive order's commitment is also based on advancing measures beyond the MPAs, such as enhancing biodiversity safeguards in national marine sanctuaries, national estuary programs, and areas of special biological significance. This will be done through a collaborative stakeholder process, and the state will not consider MPA network expansion as a component of meeting the state's 30 by 30 marine conservation goals prior to the completion of the decadal management review in 2022. As we look ahead to next steps, we will need additional research to understand the extent to which MPAs are conveying resilience benefits and can provide refugia in the face of climate change. We will continue partnering with tribes to build out the Tribal Marine Stewards Network in scope and geographic scale, and we will respond to data gaps and MPA management program needs identified in the decadal management review. California is fortunate to have diverse communities as well as habitats across its large coastline, and the success of the MPA network is strongly rooted in the incredible partnerships that take place across the state. We look forward to building on the work we have done together with California tribes, state and federal agencies, NGOs, academia, and the fishing communities to continue to adapt to future needs and strengthen the MPA management program in the coming years. I'd like to thank the Council and Chair Crowfoot for your continued support of the MPA network, and especially want to thank all of the partners in the audience today for your collaboration. And with that, I will now turn it over to Dr. Schumann to provide an update about what is to come with the decadal management review. Next slide.
Thank you, Tova, Secretary Crowfoot, members of the council. My name is Craig Schumann. I'm the Marine Region Manager with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update about the upcoming decadal management review of California's MPA Management Program. Before I begin, I just want to give a shout out to the summer interns. Wow, that was just an amazing presentation. And Mark, have no fear, other agencies are taking notice. I'd already passed along the staff recommendation to my colleagues in the department. And we look forward to learning from your experience and seeing how we can replicate that. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin by recognizing and thanking the members of the statewide leadership team and our tribal, state, federal, and stakeholder partners who are working together to ensure communication, collaboration, and coordination. As Tova mentioned, California's MPA management program is a true team effort. Next slide, please. The MPA review program was initially structured around 5-year reviews for each of the 4 planning regions. A 5-year review is completed for each region, concluding with the State of the North Coast report in 2017, 5 years after the adoption of that planning region in 2012. The updated 2016 master plan set a 10-year cycle of formal management reviews for the statewide MPA network. The decadal management review will be a technical report to the Fish and Game Commission that provides updates and recommendations focused on the 4 management pillars. Results from monitoring projects will include comparisons between baseline and long-term data and inside-outside comparisons, and will be informed by input from tribes and tribal communities, stakeholders, and partners. Next slide, please. The review will consider multiple data streams, including projects funded by the state and non-state sources and conducted by partner agencies and organizations. 3 science advisory working groups have been convened to provide input on the review. The Decadal Evaluation Working Group, affectionately referred to as the DUG, provided a list of science-based performance evaluation questions and metrics to detect trends and progress toward meeting the goals of the MLPA. The Climate Resilience Working Group provided detailed recommendations on how California's MPA network could help buffer impacts of our changing climate. And the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis is completing an integrative analysis of MPA monitoring data collected from multiple monitoring projects across the state. Next slide, please. Engaging with tribes and stakeholders is a high priority leading up to the decadal management review. A committee comprised of tribal representatives is helping to inform the state on tribal specific interests and needs. And the department and OPC are working with a committee of key communicators across sectors to advise us on how to effectively share and receive information leading up to the review. Next slide, please. There will be numerous opportunities for public engagement leading up to the decadal management review. This fall, we will host a series of public engagement webinars to share information about the review and receive input. And these will be scheduled for early October. And the department has set up a dedicated webpage and email address to share and receive information. Next slide, please. The technical report to the Fish and Game Commission will consist of an assessment of MPA Network's progress toward the MLPA goals, a summary of knowledge gaps and opportunities for next steps, a summary of action taken to engage tribes in the ocean community, and feedback received leading up to and during the review, a framework for translating performance evaluation results and knowledge gaps into management recommendations, and adaptive management recommendations and next steps, all framed within the 4 pillars of the Mpa Management Program. We are also working with OPC and Commission staff and partners to develop a technical symposium to accompany the decadal management review, and then we'll present it all to the Fish and Game Commission. Next slide, please. So where is this all going? While we are not expecting the Fish and Game Commission to take formal action when they receive the decadal management review report, we do expect that at subsequent meetings, they will consider all information available and provide the direction to the department and implementation partners to help further the program towards meeting the goals of the MLPA. Next slide, please. And with that, I would just like to thank the department's MPA project, specifically Program Manager Becky Oda and Supervisor Steve Wirtz, who have essentially been at this since the very beginning, and all their dedicated staff, and also all of our partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig and Tova. That was really helpful. You know, the context that Tova provided in the overall program, and then Craig, the update in terms of how the decadal review will be performed. Just an important point to make, you know, as we move on to these action items, and it's reinforcing a point that Tova made. You know, while we're enthusiastic at our agency, the Natural Resources Agency, to advance this 30 by 30 target to conserve 30% of California by 2030, we've been very clear from the beginning that no consideration of changes or expansion of the MPA network would even be discussed before a decadal review is completed. Simply put, we need to understand the impacts of the MPA network, everything from biodiversity to impacts on fishing. And so we've been very clear that in this discussion of a pathway to 30 by 30, really this question of MPAs and the role they play will be discussed once a decadal review is completed. And that's really important because I was speaking for myself, but I think everybody, you know, we're not making any assumptions around the future of the MPA network until that science-based decadal review is completed. So I wanted to make that clear. I don't see any hands or questions or comments from council members. So I will then move on to introduce the second of 3 parts of this item, which is, again, consideration of authorization to disperse funding for the MPA signage project, and invite our colleague Sandra Fogg, who is a California Sea Grant Fellow, to present on this.
All right, thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. Good afternoon, council members. I'm Sandra Fogg, California Sea Grant State Fellow with the MPA program. And today I'm happy to present to you a statewide signage project that would help to increase compliance with California's Marine Protected Area Network through the assessment, evaluation, and installation of regulatory and interpretive MPA signs. Next slide, please. Enforcement and compliance make up one of the 4 pillars of MPA management. Compliance is necessary for MPAs to meet their ecological goals to protect and enhance coastal and marine ecosystems. Signage can improve compliance by building public awareness and understanding of MPAs and their associated regulations. For instance, tide pool visitors might unknowingly harvest mussels or urchins from a state marine reserve, but a regulatory sign would help to inform visitors that no take is allowed. For the past decade, California Marine Sanctuary Foundation has been educating the public by leading a statewide MPA signage effort to combine funding from OPC and the Resources Legacy Fund. In partnership with the MPA Collaborative Network and other partners, CMSF has successfully created and installed over 400 educational and regulatory signs across the state. These include things like, next slide, regulatory signs, which provide brief summaries of MPA restrictions and orient visitors with MPA boundary information. So these types of signs are typically used at boat launches or other access points. Next slide, please. Informational signs, which provide more generalized MPA information, restrictions, and boundaries within certain stretches of coast. These signs are often placed at harbors to highlight MPA boundaries to boaters. Next slide. And interpretive signs. So these panels educate the general public and non-consumptive coastal users about the fact that MPAs exist and some allowed activities, but mostly give the reader a sense of natural and cultural history of the area and why it's a place worth protecting. And these past efforts have been significant for MPA outreach and compliance, but California's expansive coastline means that there are many more access points than signs that have been installed. So this project represents the next stage in a statewide cohesive signage effort and will help to strengthen past efforts and to further enhance sign effectiveness. The MPA Collaborative Network recently identified additional signage as a priority from collaborative members across the state. Through a series of compliance forums funded by OPC and RLF, members of 14 county-based MPA collaboratives identified the top compliance concerns in local MPAs, which were poaching, trash pollution, wildlife disturbance, and harmful tide pooling. Next slide. The number one solution identified to address these compliance concerns was signage. Increased signage was also identified as a need and set as a priority by the MPA statewide leadership team in the most recent leadership team work plan. Next slide. While we need more signs, we also need improved signs, as effectiveness varies with different audiences. Findings from the recently published OPC Scientific Advisory Working Group report showed that public knowledge of the MPA network can influence people's perceptions, attitude, and behaviors, including compliance with regulations. Determining what different stakeholders know, how they obtain and process information, can further our understanding of the linkage between knowledge and action related to MPAs. Identifying which signs have the greatest impact on different perceptions will help us to better influence compliance with signage and other outreach efforts. The resulting improved understanding of effective signage will also inform appropriate sign content decisions and therefore maximize the impact and reach of our investments in the statewide effort. Next slide, please. Given the length of coastline involved, the installations of signs is crucial to ongoing outreach compliance efforts. The intended outcomes are to conduct a needs assessment and inventory to identify signage gaps, develop a user-friendly mobile tool that maps existing sign locations and allows stakeholders to input information on sign conditions and needs, evaluate signage messaging and effectiveness, engage stakeholders to contribute relevant content and coordinate efforts around the state, and to create and install 75 to 100 new signs in priority locations. All language will be reviewed by CDFW, tribes, and other agencies as necessary. Overall, this project seeks to better inform coastal visitors about MPA regulations to increase compliance and foster stewardship of these special places. OPC recommends the disbursement of up to $500,000 to California Marine Sanctuary Foundation to fund the assessment, evaluation, and installation of statewide and regulatory and interpretive MPA signs, which aligns with OPC Strategic Priority 3.1 to protect and restore coastal and marine ecosystems. The MPA Collaborative Network is also an integral component to the project team and will be a sub-grantee to this funding. By combining their capacity and expertise, CMSF and the MPA Collaborative Network will continue the momentum achieved from previous efforts to increase awareness and compliance of MPA regulations. CMSF is also working with RLF to acquire an additional $100,000 in support of this project. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sandra. We'll move on to the, oh, Mike, you have a question or a comment.
I can do it later.
Do this, if you don't mind, let's have you hold that, and then we'll do
Yeah.
the last of this three-part presentation, and then you'll be the first one that we call on when we're done. The last piece of this is, again, consideration of funding for MPA long-term monitoring, specifically California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program. And we welcome Lindsay Bonito, our colleague, to present on this.
Great. Thanks, Secretary Crowfoot. Good afternoon, members of the council. I'll wait for this to get going. I'm Lindsay Bonito, the MPA Program Manager at OPC, and I'll be sharing a project that benefits both the MPA Long-Term Monitoring Program and Fisheries Management in California as we round out this MPA agenda item. Next slide, please. Thanks. As we have heard today, California is embarking on the first decadal management review of its MPA network, a feat that could not be accomplished without its partnerships and collaborations with NGOs, community science organizations, and academic institutions to both collect and compile the best available science. The California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program, or CCFRP, is a unique community-based science program that has been bringing together fishermen and scientists to gather information for both MPAs and fisheries management. By providing an additional $500,000 to CCFRP, the state will continue to support this critical data set that has and will continue to inform California's MPA management program. Next slide. Established in 2007, CCFRP has become one of the most successful and rigorous community-based science programs in California. As a statewide partnership of more than 50 different groups of anglers, captains, scientists, NGOs, charter companies, and resource agencies, CCFRP uses collaborative research to aid conservation and sustainable fisheries management that supports a viable blue economy in California. To examine the effects of MPAs on local marine resources, CCFRP actively monitors 14 areas across the state in partnership with 6 academic institutions seen here. Next slide, please. The work of the collaborative provides critical information to fulfill the legislative mandate of the Marine Life Protection Act. Since 2007, CCFRP has utilized local charter boats and the help of numerous volunteer anglers to study 4 Central California MPAs. In 2017, the program expanded statewide to include 10 additional MPAs. The program has been foundational in MPA monitoring by providing critical data to allow the state to understand how MPAs can affect fisheries along our coastline. The data collected through CCFRP has also been used in fisheries management more formally by contributing life history and catch data to groundfish stock assessments. Next slide. By combining the expertise and ideas of a diverse group, CCFRP has established protocols to evaluate MPAs, the status of nearshore fish stocks, and how climate change is impacting marine resources in California. The robust monitoring has allowed the state to track changes in fish biomass through time. As you can see here, MPA reference sites at Año Nuevo and Point Lobos have higher biomass than their respective reference sites outside of protected areas. Next slide. In addition to important ecological monitoring, CCFRP's extensive outreach and education work within the recreational fishing community has improved perceptions of MPAs in this important stakeholder group. Through a survey of volunteer anglers, opinions towards MPAs were more positive after volunteering with CCFRP. Next slide. From 2007 to 2020, CCFRP has monitored sites at 12 MPAs and 12 reference sites, which are sampled 3 times annually statewide. CCFRP supports 31 sport fishing businesses, which have conducted over 600 sampling trips. Nearly 200,000 fishes of 94 species have been caught and released, with 60,000 fishes tagged and over 1,700 individual volunteer anglers participating in MPA monitoring. Next slide. By providing $500,000 to CCFRP for the upcoming 2022 field season, the OPC will ensure that the long-term monitoring of our MPAs continues through the decadal management review period. As mentioned earlier, this program has informed the MPA network since its inception and will provide critical data as we embark on our first review of the MPA network. Next slide. The work done by CCFRP contributes significantly to OPC strategic priorities, in particular those listed in Goal 3, enhancing coastal and marine biodiversity. Next slide. Thank you, Council, for your time and all those listening in. We'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I've said it before, the photos in the presentations are wonderful, and they really breathe life into the presentations. So thank you for that. We're going to go to public comment in just a moment, but for those members of the council that would like to ask questions or ask points of clarification, please do so. And we'll start with Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. I'll be quick. A couple questions, Sandra. One is, are there currently metrics for monitoring the effectiveness of signage, whether it's regulatory or informational, or is that part of what's going to be developed with this funding?
Yeah, exactly. So part of the scope of this project will include an evaluation of the effectiveness of signs, and we have ongoing work that we're working with CDFW to connect our education and our outreach to different compliance and enforcement efforts. So that is included, and we're working to refine that scope and seeing how we're going to evaluate it and what those metrics will be, but that's going to be within that.
Okay, and then the other question is, are there, there's a number of signs in the Santa Barbara region, and is there, either in terms of this funding or currently, I'll say operation maintenance program just to go out and check signs annually or on whatever basis to see the condition they're in and address whatever deficiencies are present?
So this project is actually going to address some of those issues. Part of the scope is to be developing a mobile tool, and the tool will allow stakeholders, if you see a sign when you're in Santa Barbara going to the beach that's been graffitied or is missing or something, to input that information, and it will have a real-time automated way in order to be able to see what the conditions of signs are, because that currently is not in place and it requires something out here in the field.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much, Mike. Let's move to public comment. And again, I want to go over just the instructions for public comment. If you do want to make a comment, please, and you're joining us by video, please raise your virtual hand, and that will put you in the queue. And our team will unmute you, announce your name, and you'll be able to provide comment. If you've called in the meeting via telephone, please press pound and the number 2 to raise your hand. Depending on how you've accessed the meeting, you may also have to unmute yourself. Each commenter has 2 minutes each, and there'll be a timer on your screen to track your allotted time. If you're interested in sharing comment on this item, please do press pound 2 on your phone or raise your hand now. And then as we move forward, please indicate your interest in commenting on an agenda item by the time that the presentation is completed. So let's move forward with public comment.
Thank you, Chair Crowfoot. First 3 commenters are going to be Julia O'Hearn, then Bill Stranley, followed by Nicole Palma. Julia, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Dr. Julia O'Hearn. I'm the operations manager for the Marine Mammal Center's Monterey Bay office, and also a co-chair for the Monterey Marine Protected Area Collaborative. So I'm providing public comment today in support of the funding for the Marine Protected Area Collaboratives. The Marine Protected Area Collaborative is a really unique opportunity for government officials and members of the public to work together to protect, learn, and manage our shared resources. And we've been really successful at bringing in our local communities in a very inclusive way. The collaboratives take advantage and utilize the local knowledge of the public, MPA users, and stakeholders. We're very active along the coast, engaging members in regular meetings and highlighting local events that benefit or utilize MPAs. Some of our projects include the creation of MPA toolkits, continuation of the MPA ambassador program, and the upcoming enforcement and compliance forums. And one project I really want to highlight, because we've worked on it very hard here in Monterey, is the project of blending tradition and tech. This project revamped a previous successful project to create a fully bilingual English and Spanish educational resource for marine education and conservation and outreach. These booklets incorporated 3D augmented reality coloring sheets that feature a lingcod, a California two-spot octopus, and a snowy plover. The app also includes educational games that allow users to experience a marine protected area through the eyes of the octopus and the lingcod. They're super engaging, kids love them. All of our adult members love them as well. And through our MPA collaborative, we were able to distribute these booklets, over 5,000 of them, up and down the California coast. These kinds of projects allow us to continue engaging the public and highlighting California's rich coastal resources in an inclusive and collaborative manner. Thank you very much for the invaluable funding.
Thank you for all you're doing.
Our next speaker is going to be Bill Stranley. Bill, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Stanley. I am the Natural Resource Specialist for the Bureau of Land Management and represent the Bureau's California Coastal National Monument. As a core managing partner of the Coastal Monument, along with California Fish and Wildlife and California State Parks, the Bureau of Land Management has the goal of protecting and sustaining marine ecosystems through the implementation of the Marine Life Protection Act. BLM wants to applaud the Marine Protection Area Management Program and the MPA Collaborative Network for all the amazing work accomplished over the past decade. Given that the coastal monuments, 20,000 rocks and islands, stretch the entire 1,100 miles of the California coast, it overlaps with virtually all of the 124 designated MPAs. And as such, the monument benefits from all of the resource protection, research, monitoring, and restoration efforts being implemented. And the BLM has been able to collaborate with the MPA management program on many projects over the past decade. The BLM is proud to be a member of the MPA statewide leadership team, and many BLM staff along the coast participate in MPA collaborative chapter activities, including the awesome work that Julia just highlighted in Monterey that generate public awareness and stewardship of the coastal monument and its marine resources. Specifically regarding Agenda 5B, we certainly hope that we can contribute as an active partner in the signage project and hope it will contribute to our accomplishing our goals of promoting stewardship of coastal resources. We look forward to partnering with the OPC, Cal Fish and Wildlife, and the MPA Management Program and the collaborative network for many decades to come. Thanks much.
Thank you for all the Bureau's partnership.
Next speaker is going to be Nicole Palma, followed by Wayne Katau, and then caller with the last four digits, 7789. Nicole, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Nicole Palma, and I am the program manager for the MPA Collaborative Network. First, thank you to the Ocean Protection Council and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife for all of their efforts to implement and manage California's MPAs and for their continued support of those working on the ground to ensure these MPAs are successful. Over the last 8 years, our 14 volunteer county-based collaboratives have completed multiple rounds of small grant projects focused on raising MPA awareness through the development of resources and programs like those highlighted by Tova and other commenters today. They have also played a key role in community science projects such as MPA Watch and Snapshot Cal Coast, and supported enforcement of and compliance with MPA regulations in their local area. In collaboration with CDFW, we hosted MPA enforcement trainings for enforcement partners and officers in 2016, and are currently leading a multi-year MPA compliance initiative funded by the OPC. This initiative includes MPA violation data collection, a second round of enforcement trainings, community compliance forums with associated small grant funding for compliance projects, and a district attorney MPA training and task force. We strongly encourage you to fully fund all of the MPA projects before you today. The statewide MPA signage project in particular was informed by the community forums we held for each coastal county, where the #1 recommended solution statewide was signage. This project includes many important pieces designed to set the state managing agencies and local partners up for success in the future, such as the development of a mobile application for crowdsourcing sign locations and condition, evaluation of current signage effectiveness, and development and implementation of new signs based on evaluation results. As a reminder, everyone is welcome to join their local collaborative and get involved. More information is on our website at mpacollaborative.org. Thank you all for your time today.
Thanks, Nicole.
Next speaker is going to be Wayne Cattell. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and the Ocean Protection Council. Wayne Cotto with Coastal Conservation Association of California, representing the saltwater anglers. Our anglers have been participating with the CCFRP and believe these very important studies need to continue. This is one program that combines the scientific community with the CPFP fleet and the angling community. It educates the public and helps bridge the gap to dispel misinformation. If this monitoring effort is limited or discontinued, it will open to criticism from the fishing community about long-term management, monitoring, enforcement, which has been a concern from the beginning. This would be very bad not to show full support of the MPA network, as we are in the middle of the decadal review and the 30 by 30 efforts. So we're requesting the funding continue for the CCFRP projects. We also would like to support the signage initiatives, as we have been participating in the MPA collaboratives up and down the coast where volunteers are available, representing the fishing community in the collaboratives. And we believe that signage and all the things that the collaboratives have been trying to do to get outreach have been very instrumental in helping protect our MPAs. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
Next speaker is going to be caller last four digits 7789, followed by Caitlin Gaffney and then Ashley Eagle Gibbs. Caller 7789, you now have the floor.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and members of the Ocean Protection Council. My name is Caitlin Sprofera, and I'm the Program Director and Evaluation Specialist for the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. On behalf of the CMSF team, I would like to commend the efforts of the Ocean Protection Council and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to support the decadal review of California's network of marine protected areas. California's MPA network serves as a global model both for ocean conservation and for interagency cooperation and community engagement. Our organization is proud to support outreach and education efforts over the past 15 years. We have conducted needs assessments, implemented outreach campaigns for consumptive and non-consumptive ocean recreation communities, and evaluated the impact of outreach to meaningfully inform network implementation. I'm also excited to announce that in the coming days, CMSF will also be releasing a report detailing the results and findings from a recent evaluation of select MPA outreach tools. Overall, we believe that review of the effectiveness and achievements of the collective efforts in MPA implementation will ensure the success of our network, and we look forward to continued participation in the process. For the decadal review, we specifically encourage the synthesis of scientific information into concise summaries and infographics. We also suggest disseminating easily digestible content through popular existing channels that have already proven successful in reaching target audiences. For the projects before you today, we recommend fully funding the statewide MPA signage project. As a part of this project, CMSF will evaluate the efficacy of signage before developing new signs to ensure funding is allocated wisely. We also strongly recommend fully funding the California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program, an innovative program that provides a valuable opportunity for fishermen and scientists to work together and generates an important data set to inform MPA management. This is a really exciting time for MPAs, and I look forward to the outcomes of the decadal review. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Next speaker is going to be Caitlin Gaffney. Caitlin, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Caitlin Gaffney, and I am the Ocean, Coast, and Fisheries Program Director with Resources Legacy Fund. RLF has been a partner with the state of California on this Marine Protected Area Network adventure for the past 17 years, since the initial launch of the Marine Life Protection Act initiative in 2004, and have been privileged to serve in this partnership and be able to help bring philanthropic support to match many of the state's efforts. We are just very excited and proud of all the work that's been accomplished by the state of California and its many partners. A network of 124 marine protected areas off a heavily populated coastline is no small feat. There's a lot of MPA work being done around the globe, and California really is serving as an example, not only in terms of the conservation that's been achieved, but really on this management front. The level of partnership and follow through that the state has committed to in terms of staffing and financing is extraordinary. And again, really is a strong example to other areas of the globe where unfortunately that's not always the case. I wanted to generally voice our continued commitment and partnership to these efforts, and also specifically our commitment to match for the MPA Collaborative Network and California Marine Sanctuary Foundation project before you today. So thank you for your attention, and you have our strongest support for these projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin, for all that you and RLF are doing to be supportive.
Next speaker is going to be Ashley Eagle-Gibbs, followed by David Hurley, and then Emily Parker. Ashley, you have the floor.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Ashley Eagle-Gibbs, and I am the Conservation Director with the Environmental Action Committee of West Marin, or EAC, based in Point Reyes Station. For 50 years, we have been working to protect the unique lands, waters, and biodiversity of West Marin, where we represent approximately 1,200 members. Thank you today for the updates on California's MPA Management Program, and we look forward to being involved in the 2022 Adaptive Management Review of the Network. Regarding 5B and 5C, we support the written comments submitted by CMCF, Heal the Bay, and RLF, and fully to support the disbursement of funding for the Signage project and the funding for the MPA long-term monitoring. I want to take this opportunity today to provide a few updates on our program. Since 2014, with our partners at Point Reyes National Seashore and Cal Academy, we have administered a successful MPA Watch program in Marin County, fostering community science. We are a certified MPA Watch partner, and we recognize the need to collect data on coastal and marine resource use in and near California MPAs to inform management and enforcement. Since 2014, our program has collected 1,428 surveys and trained 187 volunteers over the years, and we have 24 currently active volunteers. We also advocate for MPAs, and we participate in our local community compliance forum, which, as others have mentioned, identified signage as a potential solution or partial solution. And by applying the collected human use data, we have been able to track increases in human activities and potential disturbances and poaching concerns. And we continue to monitor our local MPAs. We're also in the process of launching a docent program at Duxbury Reef SMCA, and we co-chair the Golden Gate MPA Collaborative. And thanks to funding from OPC, we are finalizing our online docent training program, a 4-part regional specific online training module that has been developed with local stakeholders throughout the state. Thank you so much for your time.
Really impressive. Thanks, Ashley.
Next speaker is David Hurley. David, you have the floor.
Hello, this is David Hurley. Can you hear me okay? Yes or no?
We sure can.
Okay, very good. I'm the Northern California editor for Western Outdoor News. I'm also a graduate of Humboldt State University, so I was really pleased to see a Humboldt student in your ocean interns, and I think that's a fantastic program. What I'd like to speak in behalf of the CCRP, and I really would encourage you to continue the funding. As you might be aware, fishermen have not always been in favor of the MPAs. However, having gone on a couple of trips this last year and watching the leadership of Rachel Brooks and Jake Todd and that crew, that hardworking crew on the events, I'm sold with the amount of research and the dedication, the passion, what takes place on that ship, the science, that the preciseness that goes on. It is very impressive to be a part of that. as a fisherman and someone who represents the interest of fishing. I think the MPAs are important, and I think the science is absolutely essential. So we recently ran an article on the CCFRP in Western Outdoor News. We received a lot of positive feedback for that. It is a tremendous program, and I think the more that you get the information and the data out there, the better it will be. People will understand it more. We will continue to be a part of that through our publication, but I'm also very happy to be able to express how impressed I am with this group of scientists, and I'm going to highly encourage you to continue that funding. And thank you.
Thank you, David. You'll be glad to know our executive director, Mark Gold, got up to Humboldt just recently, and it may have been his first time up there ever.
Next speaker is going to be Emily Parker, followed by our last speaker, who is June Shrestha. Emily, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good morning, Secretary Crowfoot and honorable council members. My name is Emily Parker, and I'm the coastal and marine scientist with Heal the Bay, a nonprofit organization based in Santa Monica with decades of experience working on marine protected areas in California. I'm also the manager for the shore-based MPA Watch program here in LA County and the co-chair of the LA MPA Collaborative. Heal the Bay has been proud to support the MPA network over the past decade with education, outreach, monitoring, and research efforts, some of which you've already heard about this morning, including signage, informational brochures, human use data collection, and much more. We're very excited to continue our involvement in the MPA Decadal Review and would like to thank OPC and CDFW staff for the update this morning on that review process. With respect to the MPA projects before you today, we recommend fully funding both of these projects. The statewide MPA signage project is needed to evaluate the current existing signage and its effectiveness, and we're very much looking forward to working with the lead organizers on this project, as local and community-driven information is going to be essential to informing signage. The California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program is also an invaluable tool connecting anglers and scientists together and has contributed essential data to inform MPA effectiveness. So we strongly support funding both of these projects. Thank you very much for the time to comment today, and Heal the Bay is looking forward to continued dedicated work on our local MPAs with OPC council and staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last speaker is June. June, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is June Shrestha. I'm a California Sea Grant State Fellow at the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. I'm here to quickly express support for all of the MPA program initiatives outlined today and the sanctuary's commitment to support this decadal review process. It was really great to hear where everything's going with that. And as a quick follow-up to Mike Brown, who asked about those signs in Santa Barbara, I just want to mention that the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary has a number of signs on the coast in and around Santa Barbara as well, and it's been on our radar to improve the signs about the sanctuary and the protected areas. Lastly, big shout out to all of those OPC interns with your presentations in Agenda Item 4. You all did an amazing job and you sound so professional, and I can't wait to see where your future takes you. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks, and totally agree with your last point. Is that the conclusion of public comment?
That is all our commenters. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Really helpful public comment. So at this point, we will consider taking action on the two action items on the on this agenda item number 5, but certainly would welcome any comments or questions from council members before we do that. And if there are none, then we would ask for a recommendation to move these two action items.
Well, I'll go ahead and make the motion. I move that we adopt both the item 5B, I believe, 5B and 5C as outlined in the staff reports. And I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. And I would just say, you got it exactly right, 5B and 5C. And I'll just suggest that our staff's recommendation to just ask your concurrence that the motion would read, moving to adopt the proposed findings for all projects as recommended by staff, approve the projects as described, and delegate to Director Gold the authority to implement the council's approval.
Second.
Great.
Yes.
So we have Matt making the motion, Mike Brown seconding. I'll note that we welcome Brenna Sheldon from Cal EPA, who is here as Secretary Blumenfeld's official alternate. So I would ask Jenn Eckerle to call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Crowfoot. Councilmember Dumla.
Aye.
Councilmember Sheldon.
Aye.
Councilmember Diamond.
Aye.
Councilmember Brown.
Aye.
And Secretary Crowfoot.
Aye.
Okay, the projects are approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Item 6 on our agenda is an informational item, and it is to inform us on the development of our microplastic strategy to address coastal and ocean water quality. This, of course, advances one of our strategic plan goals, which is number 3, enhancing coastal and marine biodiversity, and specifically objective 3.4, which is improving coastal and ocean water quality. And we get Mark Gold to present this update.
All right, thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. I know not the norm for me to be presenting. Holly Wire, who was our lead on this for the last few years, has been promoted and is now working for the Coastal Commission and actually doing a lot of work on offshore wind. So we still get to see her quite a bit. Before I get going, I just want to thank Holly, and I think you obviously everybody heard earlier from our superb interns, Mairin and Molly, for the incredible work that they've done on this as well. And then, of course, Justine Kimball and Jenn Eckerle. So let's move to the next slide. So the microplastics problem. This is a really tough one, everyone, in that we have a problem in that microplastics are ubiquitous in the marine and coastal environment. We've all talked about here numerous times the fact that globally we have a marine debris plastics crisis with an estimated 8 million metric tons of plastics per year being dumped into the ocean. We find microplastics really everywhere that we're looking. So whether it's in ambient waters or marine life or humans or on the beach, even in the most remote places on Earth, we're now seeing microplastics. So it's a growing concern. And I think what's different about it, think about all the major environmental problems that we all deal with, and we have dealt with for the last 50 years, is that we don't have as much information as we would really like on what the actual harm is in the marine environment to having this ubiquitous pollution problem. So we have a state of the scientific knowledge that's growing incredibly, but California specific information is still limited. And there's also a limitation on cause and effect data really globally that's being fulfilled, but this problem has really taken the interest of the research community largely within the last 5+ years. Next slide, please. So why are we here? What's the background? So Senator Portantino introduced SB 1263, which is signed into law, and it requires us to coordinate with the agency partners to adopt a microplastic strategy. And that deadline is right around the corner. We're supposed to finish this up, believe it or not, this year, and then provide a report to the legislature, ideally by the end of 2021. We're not going to quite get there, but we'll have a draft available for your review and for the public to review by the end of this calendar year. Also, within the legislation by 2025, we need to report on implementation progress of this microplastic strategy itself, as well as additional findings from strategy-related actions and research, and make additional recommendations on additional policy and research as well. So it's really getting going on this right away, starting next year, and trying to make as much progress as possible by 2025 and then reporting back. And so the actual report itself on the strategy has the key components that you see here on the slide, which is problem characterization. We need to know the sources. Where are all the microplastics coming from? What are the pathways from the standpoint of a risk assessment perspective to both marine life? Then you also have the State Water Resources Control Board that's doing extraordinary work on pathways to on human health from drinking water consumption. So that's going on at the same time. And so we're getting a better idea on those issues. We put together a risk assessment framework that I'll talk about moving in the slides ahead. We need to include standardized methods for sampling, detecting, characterizing, and monitoring microplastics. To that end, SCWRP, Southern California Coastal Water Research Project in particular, has done extraordinary work in that realm and really figuring out the best, most efficient and replicable and cost-effective way to measuring microplastics in the ambient aquatic environment. A prioritized research plan will be part of this strategy. And then finally, policy recommendations and management actions. And so to that extent, I won't talk about the macroplastic issues. We've talked about that extensively here. I'll focus on the micro. Next step. So this is the risk assessment framework. Really great work by the Ocean Science Trust in convening a group of some of the most globally known and respected experts in this burgeoning field. Again, it's really in its embryonic stages. And we got some great people working on putting together this risk assessment framework. Overall, they took a precautionary approach in looking at this problem because of the state of the science on this issue, in that we know that there's huge variability in concentrations, and we're seeing increasing concentrations in ambient waters. So that means in stormwater as well as in the marine environment directly. But we don't have as much information on what about the toxicity of the particles themselves and how the toxicity is harming marine life or aquatic life. And so we're really looking at this more from the standpoint of the particulate approach. What I often liken it to, and it might not be the perfect analog, is that if you look at the Clean Air Act and the issue of particulate matter, PM10 and PM2.5, that's kind of the approach that we're looking at from the standpoint of microplastics, which is what are the concentrations of the particles themselves, rather than looking at every single toxicant that's associated with those particles. That research is ongoing. It's going to be growing a great deal over the years, but it's not very robust at this point. And so focusing on the particulates, the particles themselves, is really the way to go. We agree that source reduction makes the most sense. Once you have these, billions, if not trillions, of microplastic particles getting into the environment, removing them is really difficult, especially if it gets into the ocean. Once it gets into the ocean, it's almost a lost cause. And so we're talking about particles that range from literally sub-micron range all the way up to 5 millimeters in diameter. So it's a huge range of particle size that we're talking about in the aquatic environment. And so we need to better understand an inventory of the top sources of microplastics. To that end, some work that San Francisco Estuary Institute was very comprehensive in what they did in San Francisco Bay, and we've commended them for that as well. We're using a lot of their information. As you may recall from that study, one of the biggest sources was urban runoff and was actually tire fibers and dust. And so that was something that was literally half of the particle load that was going to San Francisco Bay. Other sources would include wastewater treatment plants, but the biggest concern is definitely from runoff at this point. And also emissions play a pretty significant role, because you can imagine particles get emitted and then they settle out and then they end up in runoff as well. And so this risk assessment, we're talking about revisiting this every 5 years as the studies increase over time. And you see some of the other priorities that were addressed within the microplastics pollution in California document that was put together by the OST panel. Next slide. And so the recommendation was focusing on the following high priority areas. So everything from particle morphology to polymer types, fate and transport pathways, which I just addressed, sources, which I referred to. Laundry and textiles is definitely a significant concern as well. We think urban runoff is the biggest area to focus on at this point. Although we are funding, you may recall, a study again with SQUIRP looking at sewage treatment plants and the efficacy of microplastics removal in various different levels of treatment at sewage treatment plants. We'll have the results of that study at the middle to end of next year. And then what are the priority endpoints that we're looking for? And this is a tough one. There's more and more literature by the day in this arena, but there's still a lot of gaps on really looking at, okay, so what happens to the microplastics when they're in our mollusks and our crustaceans and fish, and what are the actual impacts of that? Are we seeing ecological impacts? Are we seeing individual acute effects at the toxicity level? There's, again, growing literature on this, but not as robust as one would hope at this point. Next item. Next slide. So within this strategy outline, this is what we're really looking at from the standpoint of moving forward. So we have a draft in play at this point that's being reviewed by our colleagues at state agencies, and we'll see a list of them in the coming slides. And so the background is really problem characterization, risk assessment framework I just covered, really giving direction on field monitoring and analysis, and the like. So I think we've largely gone over that. Next. So these are draft policy recommendations, and these are suggested. So I want to make sure that everybody understands these are suggested. They are not final in any way, shape, or form. We understand that these are controversial and pretty far-reaching, but really, when you look at the scope and scale and complexity of this problem and what the potential environmental impacts are, and looking at this in the framework of the risk of that was laid out by the microplastics scientific panel in their risk assessment framework, you can understand why some of these recommendations are on here. So in the source reduction side, just going through these, requiring redesign of tires to reduce tire wear debris. Or one of the things that's not on here is to actually have capture devices on tires to make sure that the tire dust does not get released into the environment. Those are things that are being talked about. And we know that Department of Toxic Substances Control and Cal EPA are taking a hard look at tires for a number of different reasons right now, not just microplastics, but zinc, as well as the antioxidant that was found to be so toxic to salmonids. Promoting investment in natural textile processing and manufacturing systems in California. We need to learn better, frankly, on whether natural microfibers are definitely safer than than artificial textile fibers. We don't have much literature on that. And so it might just be eliminating the microfibers to begin with. To that end, moving further down, which is a treatment solution, there's been some discussion at the legislature and attempted legislation. I think Assemblymember Stone can speak to this as well, on requiring filters on washing machines with a mesh size of 100 microns or smaller. And so is that something that needs to be done? One, in talking to CDPH, which was interesting, and pretty bold, was prohibiting cigarette filters in California if research, which they are undertaking right now, and they're about a year into it, finds that the filters do not reduce the harm in public health caused by smoking. You may recall every time we look at a beach cleanup results, cigarette butts end up being #1 item on the list, despite the fact we in the state of California have banned smoking on California's beaches. Runoff and basically people breaking the law is the source of that. Expanding the microbead ban is another issue. A great start in what California and the nation has already done. There's more potentially that could be done. One thing that's not on here is also nurdles, which are the pre-production plastic pellets that generally run about 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter, really common on our beaches. There's been a number of studies that have demonstrated that. And so right now there's management that's been required from the Krikorian bill from about a dozen or so years ago. But there isn't anything that says maybe we should be reconfiguring microbeads so that they pose less environmental harm. On the stormwater side, requiring biofiltration and infiltration, stormwater best management practices is an approach. It might not be ideal because then you're obviously having the microplastics get into our soil or get into our stormwater treatment media. But that could be infinitely better than having it continue to get into the aquatic environment. So that's another recommendation that's in here as well. And as I stated earlier, we need strong, clear recommendations for how to do water sample analysis and what we need to do monitoring statewide to really have a much better handle, not only on the density of microplastics in our receiving waters, but also the harm that's being caused by these. And ideally working with State Water Board, which is obviously their responsibility here, is potentially even developing water quality objectives for state ocean waters by 2025. Next slide, please. So where are we now? We're receiving feedback on the initial draft. We've received that a little bit already. We had the Plastic Pollution Steering Committee meeting, and that's State Water Board, Coastal Commission, State Lands, DPH, Cal Recycle, Caltrans, and OEHA. I can't recall if DTSC is on there as well. And so we're still soliciting written comments from them. We've received some great comments already that have been very, very helpful. Because like I said, the State Water Board is doing something very similar on the drinking water side. And so there's a lot of knowledge sharing there. So our hope is to release an updated draft for public comment by the end of October. And then we'll have a final, and then we'll take that public comment and modify the document, and then have a final draft version for the council by the end of this calendar year, with our hopes that there be council consideration for possible approval at the February meeting. So that's definitely going to be a very big meeting to discuss this issue. We still need to figure out the sequence in having the governor's office review this as well, because they obviously need to review this before we forward it to the legislature. So that's the status of what's going on. As you can tell, very difficult issue, definitely a major issue of concern that everybody's taking notice of, and glad to answer any questions to the best of my ability that you may have. Thank you.
Mark, thanks so much. This is an opportunity. This is another item with opportunity to provide for public comment. And so let's move to that. Once again, if you're joining by video, if you can raise your virtual hand, or by phone, #2 in order to be recognized for public comment. Let's move to public comment.
Okay, our first three commenters are going to be Robert Mazurek, Miho Lagari, and Emily Parker. Robert, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you very much. My name is Robert Mazurek, and I'm the Executive Director of the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. I wanted to commend OPC and the state for pursuing a strategy to better understand the scale and risks of microplastics on coastal ecosystems and to identify solutions to address harmful impacts. Based on our work in the agricultural sector, we strongly recommend a focus on coastal fields and suggest that this be included in the strategy submitted to the legislature. Plastic use has led to many advances in the ag industry, but its presence in open fields, exposure to sun, water, and wind increases the transport of field plastics into non-agricultural environments through runoff, such as the ocean. Last year, we partnered with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary to conduct an internal assessment of ag plastic use in Monterey County. The assessment identified that Monterey County alone is using about 20 million pounds of ag plastics, with the use of drip tape increasing by over 250% just in the last 15 years. There is an undeniable need to responsibly manage ag plastic disposal so that it does not degrade and enter local water systems where it can be transported into the ocean. This responsibility for progress rests not only with growers, but with manufacturers, governments, recycling companies, and the sustainability collaboratives who assist growers with implementing technology and best management practices. We are currently leading scientific research on ag plastic pollution in watersheds, and with partners, we are conducting trials of biodegradable mulch in place of traditional plastic mulch on strawberry fields. We are also working with recyclers, manufacturers, and educators to increase the removal and recycling of irrigation drip tape. Thanks for your time, and we are more than willing to help OPC develop a strategy that takes into account the reduction, recycling, and removal of ag plastics before they can enter coastal waters. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Next speaker is going to be Miho. Miho, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Miho Laguerre, and I'm the Plastic Pollution Policy Coordinator with the Surfrider Foundation. We have over 20 chapters and 18 student clubs in California with over 500,000 members across the nation. Surfrider supports the Microplastic Risk Assessment Framework report recommendation that microplastic pollution risks need to be addressed in a precautionary manner, as well as avoiding regrettable substitutions, as evidence concerning the hazards and exposure to humans and the environment to microplastic is nascent and rapidly evolving. Protecting public health and the environment must be top priorities when developing the microplastic strategy. I also want to reinforce the importance of reducing microplastics at the source, as mentioned in the report. This means we need to reduce plastics at the source, and an effective place to start is eliminating all single-use plastics. We agree that a systematic and comprehensive approach is necessary and appreciate OPC's attention to this issue thus far. And thank you for presenting the draft policy recommendations. That was really helpful. We're already seeing in the San Francisco Bay Area concentrations at levels predicted to cause risk to at least 5% of species in the aquatic environment. And so it's critical that we take action to address microplastics now. And finally, Surfrider also supports the interagency coordination taking place and encourages the continued dialogue, especially with the State Water Resources Control Board. California has the unique opportunity to take the lead on addressing microplastics in our coast and ocean water quality, and thank OPC's leadership on this matter. We look forward to reviewing the draft microplastic strategy and the continuing engagement with the Ocean Protection Council and working with the future water quality program manager. Thank you.
Thanks, Miho.
Next speaker is going to be Emily Parker, followed by our last commenter, Richard Sadowski. Emily, you have the floor.
And again, council members, this is Emily Parker with Heal the Bay. As a partner of the OPC's Ocean Litter Strategy and a champion of both plastic policies and beach cleanups here in LA County for decades, Heal the Bay is particularly interested in the development of the state microplastic strategy. We've been carefully reviewing the risk assessment from the Ocean Science Trust and the microplastics health effects research from SQUIRP, and are very excited to see more movement forward on this strategy today. In recent years, there has been a considerable amount of research conducted on both identifying and quantifying microplastic pollution and on the impact of plastics. And this research on the ubiquity of microplastics in the environment and in human bodies, as noted by Dr. Gold today, is extremely concerning. While this research is new and there will always be data gaps in our knowledge and understanding of microplastics as they're extremely difficult to study, microplastics shouldn't be considered a contaminant in need of more data before regulatory action can be taken. Heal the Bay supports a precautionary approach to microplastics in California and believes that this approach warrants action sooner rather than later. We agree strongly with the bold draft policy recommendations presented today by Dr. Gold and with the comments you've already heard from Surfrider that upstream action must be the priority. We urge OPC to develop an adaptive regulatory strategy with the State Water Board that will both initiate the development of regulatory action using these tools and pathways presented today now, while also supporting continued research and monitoring and a reevaluation of the risk assessment framework in 5 years' time and into the future. Heal the Bay is very much looking forward to reviewing and commenting on the draft strategy next month. And we'd like to again thank OPC staff for their dedication on this deeply concerning pollution issue. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Emily.
Last speaker is Richard Sadowski. Richard Sadowski, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is Richard Sadowski. I'm from a grassroots group called Homefront Environmental Justice, Morro Bay. We're basically a group of local citizens who care about where they live, and we try to promote citizen science and engage in the younger generation in our neighborhoods. As Dr. Gold mentioned, the microplastics that are coming in from emissions and are in the air, this is another great argument why we should have a air monitoring around our marine protected areas and estuaries, because we could pick up this data point that is occurring and then try to understand the convection cycle, what's going on in the estuaries and how those effects are taken. This is another opportunity for getting some data and trying to get a better understanding on those effects. And the particulate matter like 2.5, where we have, fires, like recently we had these big surf fires in California and how it affected the whole coastal air quality, and getting a better understanding how those effects occur and what's happening to the estuaries at that time. So I'm encouraged that we're looking into that, but I would like to see an air monitoring program or opportunities to be made, so we could start getting that three-prong approach of land, sea, and air in a better understanding of what's happening to our oceans. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Sounds like that will conclude public comment. And so I would turn to fellow council members, Assemblymember Stone and Councilmember Diamond.
It was all right, huh?
Thank you.
I just want to confirm, if I could, with our staff, that public comment is completed.
Sorry, yes, we just forgot to take away his permission, so it's fine.
Great. Okay, Assemblymember Stone.
Thank you. I just wanted to underscore how important this is and the difficulty here, because the legislature as a policy body does not seem to buy into the precautionary principle. So the sooner we can get some of the science done, the better we're going to be able to make the regulatory and statutory arguments to the policymaking bodies here. It is very frustrating, and seeing on the list that Mark listed out, both with the microfibers and even the cigarette filters, those have not seen very much success. And I know CDPH is working on quantifying the health risks or the lack of benefit that cigarette filters provide. But so far, all of the research, and actually all of the research, not done by CDPH, but done by the universities that are doing the research into cigarette filters, show that the cigarette filters have no benefit whatsoever to the smoker, no health benefits at all to the smoker. So even when the science is pretty clear, policymakers do not seem willing to react. That's a bill that's been run 3 times now to try and get rid of cigarette filters. And they're a significant contributor. But in the end, if all we're doing then is looking at stormwater and wastewater, which are now more and more appropriately being seen as sources of supply for water in California as we're going through droughts and other changes, that downstream filtering is always at the cost of the state and the taxpayers and the ratepayers. It's the upstream attention that needs to be paid in order to ensure that the entire economy that is part of the economy that are putting these plastics into the environment are participating in whatever solutions that there are. So yes, we probably are going to need to be doing filtering, but that just means that those who are contributing are not taking any responsibility at all for solutions here. So until we get the science, it's going to be difficult, I think, to move policy, but it's absolutely critical that we start to take steps in order to reduce this. Just toxins, or we know that plastics are efficient absorbers of toxins. So anytime you're taking plastics of whatever size, including microplastics, into our bodies or into organisms that are part of the food web, we know that we're taking toxins into our bodies and into other organisms at a much increased rate. And why that's not alarming is kind of beyond me at this point, but it's not something that policymakers have been willing at this point to address. So this work needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly so that we can clarify the science and make sure that we're then able to take the policy steps we're going to protect human health.
Points well taken. Councilmember Diamond.
Hi, thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. So first, to eloquently say ditto to everything that Mark just said. Thank you, Mark. I do want to just say thanks to Holly, echo the thanks to Holly Wire for all the work that she did in this area. And honestly, congratulations to Coastal Commission for getting her, but huge thanks to Holly for the mammoth effort that she put into this over the last few years. And honestly, I just want to applaud and encourage kind of along the lines, along Mark's comments, the kind of parallel pathing of trying to get the science and data that we need in order to kind of move things forward. And at the same time, also looking at pragmatic actions that we can encourage and start outlining now. And noting that we really need the science to move political action forward, but that we also, these are pretty dramatic dangers that we're facing, and starting to outline and honestly start that same momentum campaign for some of the recommendations that you're starting to outline. In general, interpreting the precautionary principle in this context to mean needing to take action even before all is known, rather than the reverse, which is how it's often interpreted. So honestly, just really appreciative of this and want to emphasize that I think it's never too early to start outlining what those potential actions are and start socializing them as early as possible. So thanks for all the work on this.
Thanks so much. Councilmember Brown.
I also want to give a great big thank you to Holly Wire. I had a number of interactions with Holly over plastics, and she is just absolutely terrific. And I expect she will do great things in her career. This is just a great update, and looking forward to seeing the draft recommendations and report as soon as possible, and just make a request as a public council member that we get to see it not before it is a final draft. I know we can do that as a member of the public, but however we might be able to do that, that would be great. Couple of comments. One of the things you've underscored, Mark, is that much of the contributions to the marine environment of whether it's microplastics or macroplastics, microplastics in particular, is that it's a function of dissipative uses. And I really appreciate the comments of all today, but especially Robert Mazurek in terms of ag uses of plastics, in that fundamentally plastic sitting out there in the environment becomes a dissipative use. And we have to think about, if we're not start thinking about plastics and polymers, whether of whatever origin, you know, because there is in the industry a great significant movement towards bio-based polymers. We have to think about them in terms of circular systems and circular solutions. And Mark, I know that's something you guys do think about, but I want to bring that up and hope that you place it in kind of front and center in the draft, not front and center, but in a significant way in the draft. And along with that, I think all of us here recognize the need for immediate action, as Jordan just mentioned, where possible. But I also want to raise that we've seen situations where we've taken action and ended up with things that are in general covered by the term of regrettable substitutions. The function of the plastics, both in terms of using it as a way to mulch and i.e. conserve water for crops, and the drip tape, which is a much more efficient way of using water than simply using sprinklers or flooding or whatever. We don't want to move to something that may have consequences not necessarily associated with plastics in the marine environment, but other consequences, either greater water use or whatever it is. So with that, I'll just say I'm very much looking forward to the report and to the opportunity to participate in policy recommendations of the legislature. I think this is a really important product, and glad that OPC is front and center on it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike, and all great comments from council members. I know we'll all look forward, Mark, to the draft report that we can review and comment on, and then also members of the public can as well. And just a special note, Brenna, definitely want to just highlight for Secretary Blumenfeld this update and the draft report coming out, just given the intersection of on this issue with OEHA and DTSC and Cal Recycle. I just want to make sure you all are, feeling like this is complementary to the efforts of all of those departments.
Noted. Thank you very much.
Great. So that was obviously an informational item, so no action needed. So we'll move on to item 7, another informational item, which is an update on our communications efforts, specifically on building awareness on sea level rise, and then also getting the word out on OPC-funded Prop 68 resilience projects. And for this item, we'll hear once again from Mark and Dr. Kat Beheshti.
Thank you. And you have my word, council members, that for all things communications moving forward, you will hear from Jenn Savage, not me, but because she's been here such a short time, you're still stuck with me. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so you may recall it was about a year ago that we talked about a sea level rise campaign and the importance of doing one to really improve awareness statewide on a growing issue of concern. And the IPCC report that has come out that Secretary Crowfoot alluded to in his introductory remarks has pointed out that basically the rate of sea level rise has doubled in the last 15 plus years. So this is definitely a problem that's growing of concern. And so we have a great deal of different places that are already vulnerable to sea level rise, as well as king tides and storms along the state of California. And this is unfortunately only going to increase over time. So what we've done is put together a full campaign on sea level rise that's scheduled to actually launch right around the corner on September 28th. Before I get into it, I just want to give a big thanks to May 77 Communications for the work that they've done on the creative side and the strategic side, for Puente Strategies for their work in particular highlighting the Spanish language communities in the campaign, as well as all various different aspects of a multimedia campaign. And then the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, who's been really everyone's just been a great partner on pulling this whole thing together. So what you see before you right now with this beautiful screen grab of the webpage is that one of the major components of the sea level rise campaign is going to be this website. And it's what we're all really excited about is it gives us a great opportunity to display all the great work that state agencies are doing on coastal resilience, as well as on sea level rise education. And also the work of California stakeholders like environmental groups and counties and cities and ports also can be highlighted. And so we're really looking forward to that as well. We're housing this in the Natural Resources Agency, not in OPC, because there's so many different departments and agencies across the state that are just doing great work on sea level rise. And so it just made sense to us to house it as part of in CNRA. And so also, as one of the strong requests you may remember from the council, the website will include web pages that provide ways for the public to get involved in various different levels of everything from sea level rise planning to education campaigns and the like. So just wanted to let everybody know that. And so before we go to the next slide, what has happened on the communication side on the public service announcement is we've decided to take a whimsical look at yet another critical climate crisis stressor, in this case, sea level rise along California's coast. And so the concept is the ocean is moving in, and rather the gloom and doom and fear sort of approach that one often sees on climate, and we all see this on a regular basis. I mean, obviously with everything, it's very serious, obviously everything that's going on wildfire and drought and the like. And this isn't a competition. This is really trying to get people to think about what we really need to do as a state to adapt to rising seas at the same time, is protecting vulnerable marine resources and the built environment. And so with that, next slide, and roll the PSAs.
With 1 minute left to go in the game, the score remains 97-98.
All right, thanks for doing that, James. So as you can see, a very whimsical approach, and a lot of fun can be had. You see a series of 15s as well as a 30, and so most of that's obviously going to be online. A lot of work through the socials. So we have a multimedia campaign. We've also been meeting with partners both in government, at state government, as well as in the NGO community, just saying, because we have a relatively modest budget for media, is just really any help that can be provided from the standpoint of magnifying the message coming out here. And there's a lot of information that goes with that, with social media kit, et cetera, and also releasing the information to the earned media as well. So a lot going on. Just wanted to share that, kind of a fun thing, and really, the start of really a critical campaign, and really a lot of work from a lot of people across departments and within the OPC, really to get us to this point. So with that, unless there's any questions, I really wanted to pass it over to our Sea Grant Fellow, Dr. Kat Ph.D., who's really been doing some amazing communication work on our Prop 68 Coastal Resilience grant program. Kat?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, Chair Crowfoot, and members of the council. I'd like to quickly reflect back to Council Member Brown's comment at the start of today's meeting, as I hope that this mini-series that I'm going to be presenting today is really a step forward in that exact direction towards really increasing the accessibility of OPC's science communication efforts. And so next slide, please. Great. So yeah, all right. So the motivation of this mini-series was really to highlight the incredible teams behind OPC's funded work. And so this is a 15-episode series that's highlighting the 15 projects approved by Council in February of this year. And so each of the 15 videos is paired with an accompanying blog piece to improve accessibility. And we are releasing these every Tuesday and Thursday. Now, this series started about a month ago, and our hope is that this mini-series will increase local engagement and awareness of climate resilience projects occurring across the state. And already we have seen substantial success measured as an overall increase in engagement across OPC's social media platforms. And that's in thanks large part to Jennifer Savage, our policy and communications manager. And so here I have on the slide an example of that increase in engagement. So our Twitter impressions jumped from about 8,000 in July to 93,000 in August. And so with that, I'm going to just jump right in and like to cue James to bring up our montage video, which is highlighting episodes 1 through 6 and a few others that will be released in the coming weeks. As of today, we have released 7 videos for the Ocean Protection Council's Prop 68 Climate Resilience mini-series. As we turn the corner on the last half of the mini-series, I wanted to take this time to highlight the incredible teams behind these Prop 68 projects that were approved by the Council in February of this year. Many of these projects will provide coastal resilience benefits to tribes and communities entitled to environmental justice, advancing OPC's goal to improve equity across ocean and coastal policies and actions.
I still have a handful of project teams to visit, but for now, I'd like to highlight those whose episodes have been released or are coming out in the next few weeks. Let's jump right in.
People have been living on the California coast for thousands of years, but just in the last 100 years, human activities have destroyed a lot of our coastal habitats.
Our coastal risks are growing rapidly, and that's a combination of climate change, increases in sea levels, as well as storminess, but also our local development choices.
How do you protect these low-lying, underserved communities here from what we know as future sea level rise?
Californians face important choices, and one choice is to plan for the future in a proactive manner.
Now is the time for bold and comprehensive action to protect our coastline across California.
We can achieve resilience locally, but thinking about how those local projects solve local issues but contribute to larger regional goals.
We're going to need to be able to rely on some of our nature-based solutions to help in reducing those risks. And those nature-based solutions include, importantly, wetland restoration.
This is one of the tools in the toolkit that we need to use as a region to deal with sea level rise.
And that means having solutions that work in all kinds of different settings.
The foundation of estuaries is what you really need to protect. If you want a house with a good foundation, you need to protect that first.
I'm excited to shorten the distance between the science that we all support and the actual way we apply it to our restoration projects.
Sea level rise is a very real and imminent threat. And because of this, California policymakers are greatly valuing the opinions of community members that reside within the California coastal zone. And with that being said, I think it's really important for coastal residents to become involved with the sea level rise adaptation planning process. By being involved and understanding and educating yourselves on the measures and policies that are currently being enacted in your state, you will be helping us stronger, resilient coastlines altogether.
This is our chance to bring back some of those wild places.
So the more that we can do to protect these resources here, the more we're protecting that natural heritage for us and for future generations.
I think the coast is a resource for all, and it should be maintained as such.
We're on the cusp of something that's hopefully going to make a big difference.
In the bigger picture, doing these projects is going to help us understand the challenges and opportunities with adapting to sea level rise, something that thousands of jurisdictions and county parks and national parks all around the world are going to have to be dealing with. And so if we're able to do projects like this and plan projects like this, then it creates a blueprint for others who are going to need to do the same thing.
We're already witnessing the impacts of climate change with more extreme coastal flooding, wildfires, droughts, and heat waves. And no one city or public agency can face these challenges alone. So by working together from a shared understanding of the risks that we face with coastal flooding, we can be better prepared to take coordinated action in reducing our vulnerabilities.
With all of these changes that we anticipate to our coast, we are going to have to make some decisions about how we are going to manage our coast into the future.
Because you cannot have healthy humans without a healthy environment.
I'd like to thank all of the project teams, those that are captured in this video, and the ones I'll be meeting over the next few months. The dedication and determination to conserve and restore our coastal habitats and make California more resilient to sea level rise, flooding, and erosion on behalf of all Californians is truly unparalleled. With that, I'm Kat Ph.D., California Sea Grant State Fellow with the Ocean Protection Council, signing off until next time. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Okay, great. Yeah.
I just want to add to the council and everybody watching that this is really a labor of love from Kat that she has taken from literally doing the creative, the writing, the filming, the scoring, you name it. She literally took this project on by herself and has just run with it. And the whole miniseries has just been her initiative. And just look at the quality of what she's produced. It's just absolutely extraordinary. And she's a pretty damn good coastal resilience scientist to boot. So definitely amazing multi-skills. So thank you, Kat.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. So hopefully,
Even though she's a Giants fan, I had to throw that in there. Sorry.
Now it's on the record. All right, so hopefully that got everyone excited about the mini-series, and our hope is that we'll kind of bolster some of our support on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, because all of these things are being disseminated through the grantees themselves and their own social media platforms, as well as our own. And so each of these 6 so far project-specific videos that have been released are accessible on the OPC website, and they feature the project teams a little bit more prominently. So I encourage you all to check out all of those videos. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, congrats. Really, really impressive. And as Mark knows, and maybe others, I'm obsessed with trying to figure out how we communicate all of the investments that the legislature is leading on, the governor is leading on, breathing life into them. So I'm so excited to actually watch the mini-series and use it as a model for other agencies. And it's incredible that you were not only all the science, as the foundation, but then such a high production value you were able to achieve in the mini-series. So huge thanks on that. This is an item where we're inviting public comment, both on our sea level rise campaign and on these the Prop 68 mini-series. So I'll turn it to Holly to see if we have anyone for public comment.
Thank you, Chair Crowfoot. We actually do not have any public comments for this one.
Okay. Well, once again, huge thanks. We'll work to help you get your Twitter universe up and do whatever we can to help elevate this. Really great stuff. Huge thanks. And Mark, keep us apprised of when the PSAs go live on the Oceans Moving In.
We'll do the 28th, so right around the corner. So.
Excellent. So our next to final item is our consent calendar, and these are items that are typically expected to be approved without much discussion, but certainly we provide an opportunity for council members to take them off consent item for discussion if needed. 2 items: the consideration of authorization to disperse funds to Ocean Science Trust for OPC Science Advisory Team Secretariat activities. And this is simply allowing OST, led by our colleague Liz, to continue as the Secretariat for OPC Science Advisory Team. And then the second item is consideration of authorization to renew the California Fisheries Fund. And that's so essentially an evergreen loan fund that was established and operates to support sustainable fisheries for the benefit of ecosystems, those making their living off the coast and the communities that they support. So I want to turn it back over to any council members for any questions on the consent items or a motion to approve both of these items.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown makes a motion to approve both consent item 8A and consent item 8B. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks so much, Brenna. Jen, can you call the roll?
Jen, you're muted.
Okay, it wouldn't be a Zoom meeting, would it, without that? Thanks, Secretary Crowfoot. Councilmember Dunlow.
Aye.
Councilmember Sheldon.
Aye.
Councilmember Diamond.
Aye.
Councilmember Brown.
Aye.
And Secretary Crowfoot.
Aye.
Thank you. The items passed unanimously.
Excellent. We're now on to agenda item number 9, which is public comment on any non-agenda items, and we'll turn it over to Holly for any public comment.
Okay, looks like we have just a couple. First commenter is going to be Richard Stowski, followed by Katiana, and then Benjamin Harris. Richard, you have the floor.
Thank you. Richard Sadowski, Homefront EJ, Morro Bay. You know, our grassroots group is basically almost all made up of seniors. And we, you know, and most of us are on like fixed income and trying to, and our focus is loving the area and being good stewards in the area that we live in. And one of the things that I'm really encouraged about was the paid internship that that you guys were doing, and how successful that program was. I would like to see an extension of that into people in the grant funding for citizen scientists working in the field and collaborating with policymakers, local politicians, and academia. You know, it's all good and well to have volunteers, but I think that we can get more interest if we even have like part-time jobs created, climate change jobs created, and then working with local high schools and local schools, that we can bring in, you know, people's experiences from their lives together with some of the new ideas from the young people. And I think that, you know, if you guys can make some kind of an opportunity there, I think that there's a lot of potential there for success and engagement. I remember several years ago, Commissioner Brown mentioned something about ocean acidification and how a lot of people didn't even know what that was. And we've been working with local citizenry and trying to get them educated and trying to get them aware of what's going on. So I'd appreciate if you guys could, you know, maybe look into that. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard.
Next speaker is going to be Katiana Johnson. Katiana, you have the floor. Katiana, it looks like you're still muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Hi there, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Katiana Johnson, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'd like to begin by thanking the OPC for your leadership in protecting our oceans, whales, and sea turtles by funding the first phase of ropeless gear testing in California. With entanglement being the leading cause of mortality among whales, pop-up gear, also known as ropeless gear, is the path forward to reducing the risk of entangling whales. It will also provide fishermen with continued fishing opportunities during times of high entanglement risk when the whales and sea turtles are feeding off of our coast. It's imperative that we advance the development of fishing gear innovations now to prevent West Coast species from following a similar trajectory to that of the North Atlantic right whale, which unfortunately continues to accelerate towards extinction due in large part to chronic entanglement in fishing gear. To help reduce the risk posed to whales by entanglement in fishing gear, we ask that the OPC continue to invest in pop-up gear trials and development by funding subsequent phases of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation's work. We also ask that the OPC consider funding other testing efforts in different geographic regions and/or involving different fisheries. It's really important that we provide fishermen with as many opportunities as possible to use the pop-up technologies and provide feedback on how to improve them so that they meet the needs of the individual fisheries. Through the testing plan for the upcoming Dungeness crab season by the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, we hope to build trusted relationships with partners in the fishing community. We also hope to evaluate the reliability of different pop-up gear technologies and gain valuable feedback on how pop-up gear can be tailored to meet the industry's needs. However, this work should be viewed as an initial step. To move forward, we need to know how pop-up gear works in different ocean conditions and for different fisheries and when units are deployed at scale. We therefore respectively ask OPC invest in a second phase of expanded pop-up gear trials and in parallel commit funds to furthering the development of virtual gear marking system in the next budget cycle. Thank you so much. NRDC stands ready to support the council in its work.
Thanks so much, Tatiana.
Next speaker is going to be Benjamin Harris, followed by our last commenter, Lisa Gillifillan. Benjamin, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot, Executive Director Gold, and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment. My name is Benjamin Harris. I am the staff attorney at Los Angeles Waterkeeper. I would like to say a few words about the shameful history of treating the ocean as a dumping ground for toxic chemicals and other pollutants. In October 2020, the LA Times reported on the shocking discovery of barrels of DDT and related waste lying deep in the water off the coast of California between Palos Verdes and Catalina Island. Scripps has since led efforts to map the extent of the dumping, which appears to be far worse than initially thought based on recently released footage. LA Waterkeeper is seeking to protect the public from DDT contamination and other harmful ocean pollution, while also raising public awareness about these issues. Unfortunately, the deep water dumping of DDT barrels off our coast appears to be just one of 14 sites in Southern California historically used to dispose of toxic chemicals, explosives, radioactive waste, and more. This is a massive problem that impacts water quality, coastal resources, and human health across the whole state of California, and we still don't know its full magnitude or impacts on the marine environment. It will take a well-coordinated effort by state and federal agencies to begin to address this overwhelming problem. However, there is little public information available to date, no agency has taken clear leadership, and there is no system in place to ensure accountability. To move forward, LA Waterkeeper and Heal the Bay called for the creation of a community oversight council to increase communication and transparency amongst stakeholders about DDT contamination. Through the council, agencies would be expected to report regularly to council members on progress, and in turn, council members would be expected to share information with their constituencies, allowing the public to participate meaningfully in the regulatory process. LA Waterkeeper and Heal the Bay respectfully ask the OPC to examine this issue of dumped waste off the coast of California and to support our proposal to establish a DDT Community Oversight Council. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. And I know Director Gold and others are listening to that.
The last speaker is going to be Lisa. Lisa, you have the floor.
Great, thank you so much, and excellent job pronouncing my last name. That's not always an easy one. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Gelfellen, and I'm a California Conservation Manager at Wild Coast, based in San Diego. On behalf of the entire Wild Coast team, we sincerely appreciate the continued support and opportunity to work with the Council and statewide partners on conserving California's marine protected areas. We wanted to just provide a few updates regarding a few of the items that were spoken about earlier in this session. In particular, focusing on the non-compliance issues that continue to be an issue in California's MPAs. I assure you that we and partners have been pushing to help address these issues, and some of the key ways that we've done that in the last year. The compliance working group, it meets monthly with participants from MPA enforcement and compliance related stakeholder groups. We identify high priority MPA compliance needs and preventative actions to support statewide MPA enforcement and compliance needs. We help to deploy signs, as was mentioned earlier, and we develop educational materials, including a new Southern California Wildlife and Rec Guide that will be coming out soon. And we work with trainings for people like lifeguards. We just recently trained 66 new lifeguards in San Diego County on how to use the M2 radar systems. We have 2 of those M2 radars here in San Diego County, and they are proving to be very instrumental in helping with cracking down on poaching activity. So speaking of that, we are currently working with San Diego district attorneys as they try a significant commercial poaching case from the Swami State Marine Conservation Area in Encinitas. This case was officially filed in July, and they are thinking that it will be tried under AB 2369, which helps to enhance larger penalties for commercial fishing violations. Finally, wanted to point out that through your funding and support, we are working to restore 42 acres of wetlands in San Diego County, working with Scripps Institution of Oceanography. My goodness, 2 minutes goes so fast. I have more to say, but thank you guys for your time. I know it's been a long meeting, so thank you guys so much.
Thank you for all that you're doing.
And just to confirm, that was the last of our commenters.
Great. Holly, really appreciate your work, James' work, facilitating that public comment. It's really important to hear from all that join, and so glad that we did. We're now on to our final item of the agenda, and that is just to share with you and those joining us that our next meeting will be held on December 7th, beginning at 11 a.m. Our location is to be determined. We can certainly continue to meet virtually if that's what safety dictates, and if we're able to be back in person, we'll certainly seek to try that as well, to try to do that. Huge thanks, Mark and Jen, to you and the entire team and council members. Great progress, and we look forward to coming back together in a few short months. This meeting is now adjourned.